we can do that. This is Title 17. Okay, it's on mine now.
Yeah, I think it's. So it should be muted though. It shows mute. I don't know why his is coming through.
Mhm. Okay, you ready, Chris? Oh, pan down for me, Brock, so I can see the start. Sorry.
You want to use my sheet?
You got a hard one?
Use mine.
Thank you. Okay. Well, it's only 5 minutes late. 5 after 5, so we'd like to call this Santa Clara City Council work meeting to order. I'm Mayor Rick Rosenberg. I'd like to welcome everyone here tonight. We do have a full council: Councilman Ben Shakespeare, Councilwoman Lena Mathis, Councilman Wendell Gubler, Councilman Denny Drake, and Councilman Jared Wade are all here. Appreciate that. We'd like to go ahead and jump into the working agenda. Item 2A under general business, number 1 is, but I want to jump down to number 4, council, with your permission, and jump down to item 2A4. This is Title 17, Chapter 17.68, Plan Development Zone Discussion. I'd like to welcome Devin Snow here, the attorney that works with us on the Planning Commission items, and he's worked on this discussion. And to turn over Devin, Matt, Brock, Devin.
Okay. So this is a little unusual. You can kind of look at the back of my head as I speak, but basically I understand Matt has already kind of brought you up to speed on what the intent of these revisions is. But basically the overall goal was to encourage developers and applicants to read the chapter. And so we brought down some of the length and made it a little more readable, and omitted some of the material that wasn't really doing a lot. And so, as I understand it, the purpose of the meeting today was to give the council a chance to review it and ask any questions of us about changes that we've made. And then also you'll notice from the packets that Lena has gone through and proposed some revisions as well. And so, so before I get into Councilmember Mathis's comments, are there any questions about the text of the amended chapter that we've submitted?
I'll have some, but later.
Okay. That sounds good. Well, let me get to Councilmember Mathis's comments. And again, thanks to her for her close review, and for any who have reviewed it as closely as she had. And by the way, let me just say, one of the best things that you can do as the land use legislative body is to look at these use tables for each zone and see, what kinds of uses are we allowing in this zone? Are we okay with that? Do we want to prohibit some uses that are not currently prohibited? And so that's one thing that she's done, obviously. But one point she's raised is, do we really want commercial uses in the planned development residential zone? And so I'll just, again, rather than add that change to the current draft, I've just kind of highlighted that for the council's discussion. Is that something that we would like to do? Now, I think that her primary concern was there were some issues in the old chapter, or in the current chapter, where some regulations you're not sure, does it apply to residential, does it apply to commercial? And so we've made that more clear in the current proposed revision. But I think that was her primary concern. But I think it's a good issue to consider for the council. Do we want to prohibit commercial uses in the planned development residential zone? Any thoughts or concerns or ideas on that point?
I mean, I guess.
So basically, you would just use a commercial zone and not a PD commercial zone. Is that what you're saying for commercial?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
So you would use just a commercial zone, not with a PD commercial zone. So we do away with the PD commercial zone. Is that what you're suggesting?
I think the suggestion was, currently we allow mixed uses within the PDR, the Planned Development Residential Zone. Do we want to prohibit all commercial uses in that PDR zone?
Right. So we have the PDR zone, we have a PDC zone. And my thought is if you have a commercial use, why aren't we just having the commercial use in a PDC zone rather than saying we'll approve it as a conditional use in a PDR and reserve the PDR zones just for residential use? We had some projects that came before when I was on the planning commission that they were wanting conditional use permits to put in a PDR zone, but they were commercial use. And so we're saying, okay, well, are we trying to follow the residential building code, or are we trying, or ordinances, or are we trying to follow the commercial ordinances? Because they had typically mixed uses and we didn't know which piece of the ordinance to follow. So my thought is, let's make it simpler. Let's just have commercial uses in a PDC zone and have residential uses in a PDR zone. Now, in a PDC zone, you can have mixed use because that's allowed under a CUP. So you could still have residential in a commercial zone, but not the vice versa where you have the commercial and the residential. At least that's my thought. I don't know if I explained that clear enough.
I think that makes sense. And let me explain, I think, the intent of the current system, which is that we could have a master plan residential development and maybe a commercial node or a center somewhere. I think that's the intent with the current regulations, is that maybe that would make sense within a master plan residential development. But I think we have resolved the concern. There was a concern, for example, open space. Is open space required for commercial development under the current chapter? There's some ambiguity there. And so we've resolved that ambiguity in this proposed draft. We've made it a little more clear, very clear about what regulations are applicable to commercial components, what regulations are applicable to residential components. So I think we've addressed that concern in terms of what regulations would apply to each component within a development.
I think some of you'll remember that question came up with the dollar store up on the corner of Pioneer and Rachel. You know, there was some feedback from residents about why don't they have this open space, and we were saying, well, that's not really the intent. And so that's led to some of that clarification, I think.
Yeah. So for example, on the open space piece, it's very clear in our proposed revision that that's applicable to residential components. We don't want to trip over rocks and weeds to go into Cafe Rio or whatever. So that's more clear. It's not as clear in the current chapter. So I think we've addressed that major concern about which regulations apply to which. So that leaves the kind of the more broad question: do we want to prohibit commercial uses completely in a PDR zone?
The new project, Heritage Point, that was a PDR, correct? But it has the little commercial component right out on the intersection of Lava Flow and Santa Clara Drive. Was that inside the PDR?
I think it was.
It was.
Yeah.
So that wouldn't be allowed on this one. They could do a PDR on the residential side and a PDC on the corner. They would take two things. So
Or if,
that's,
I would say the other alternative, maybe not for that project, but in other circumstances, you could do a PDC for the whole thing, get a
Right.
conditional use for the
for the
for
residential.
the residential inside of it.
Yeah.
So it would still, that's what you're saying,
That's
Lane.
what
It
I'm-
would still
that's what I'm-
facilitate the mixed use.
Yes.
And I think that makes sense in a situation where you can't easily divide those uses,
Mhm.
on a map. Like, for example, say you've got, 2-story buildings with commercial on the bottom and residential on the top. That's where that would really make a lot of sense, Otherwise, I think you could draw a line and separate those and actually have the two separate zones. So,
Personally, I think I like that. That way you don't get the commercial and the residential. You don't run into residents that don't think commercial when you get a PDR. But you could still have the ability to go PDC and include the residential as a
As a conditional
conditional
use.
use.
Right.
But avoid some of the
Right.
additional requirements of the PDR. Because like when the ordinance was originally developed, we were doing no pasture, we were doing a bunch of different types of projects that had the commercial and the residential all intertwined on the bigger PD. And so I can kind of see why we were doing it then, but I think this would make some sense. That way, if you did a PDC with the conditional use for residential upstairs, the landscaping requirement could go away. Like you may want to do in some of your smaller downtown mixed use type projects that we talked about of having them on pop downstairs and the residential upstairs. So I kind of like that.
Was just a thought, just because we've had that issue before. So in my mind, it's more clear from a planning perspective. And I think developers understand it. And I think citizens can relate to that and go, okay, this is PDC. They could put residential, but it's PDC. I know what I'm getting into.
Yeah.
Just anyways.
Great. Next point.
Council, any other input on that?
I agree.
Oh, you're okay.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Go
So
for
the
it.
General plan as like highway commercial. Are we going to continue to have a commercial? Or are we going to turn everything PD? I mean, for example, Santa Clara Drive, most of that has been highway commercial if you could change the zone. So are you going to still have that commercial zone, or are you going to just make everything a PD commercial for the future?
In my mind, that's kind of a different question, because essentially what you're talking about, Denny, and that is something that we've talked about actually as we've looked at this, but what you're talking about is essentially phasing out the historic or the sort of the classic commercial zone and just utilizing the PDC for everything. I think that's something you could do. It's a little bit outside the scope of what we're talking about here, because you'd have to address that in the commercial zone chapter. But anyway, you were going to say something, I think. Mayor.
Years ago, we did that.
That's what I thought. That's
Um,
why I thought we had the PD commercial and we didn't have it.
Yeah, I remember, I think we were on planning commission when everything got zoned PD commercial. And we did away with commercial. Then when Jeff Winston came in after Vision Dixie and we updated the general plan, he suggested that we create, because we had very few zones, that we create a commercial zone, just a general commercial zone, but only apply it in very limited places.
Do we have any?
Yeah, we've got the piece north of the bank up by Harmon's.
It's straight
It's
commercial.
straight commercial.
The
Just-
Jim's RV was straight commercial.
Yeah, Jim's RV, the little piece of Greg Ants is straight commercial. Isn't there some straight commercial across the street, Corey? By Dutchman's?
By Dutchman's is commercial, right? I think so.
I don't believe it's straight commercial. No, I think that's.
There's a couple of parcels that are, not very many, but a couple of them that are. But my personal thought is they are all so intertwined in the residential settings.
Yeah, they're
that-
PDC.
That's
PDC.
PDC, okay. That I think it'd be better if they were all PDC, because then they have to come back and get their site plan elevations, everything approved at this body.
Yeah.
Which I think that's what the residents are clamoring for. The Dollar Tree was a good example of that, and that was PDC, but now gyms, we've gone through the exercise on gyms. They're all adjacent to existing residential, and the neighborhoods want to know what's going there. So that's just my thought.
So that last
Actually,
commercial one is right behind the lots on Arrowhead, where the Southwest Mental Health owns that property. Live up.
between Ditsy's house and the corner. That's commercial.
So I didn't see any adjustment, just question, okay? In my mind, we've got a huge vulnerability problem with the PD commercial zone that's already zoned with the public hearings to approve what goes in. Is there a reason why we have those public hearings when the zoning is already in place? They've elected us basically as their sounding voice for us to review and do what we feel is best for the city. Is this just for, I don't quite understand why we're having the public hearing.
Because the site plan's tied to it. That's why.
Yeah.
The site plan is tied to the zone. And if I speak out of turn, you guys tell me, but the site plan's tied to the zone in a PDC. So you have to approve the site plan to go with that zone. So until you get that,
But why do we have to have the public involved in the site?
Because they were never involved in the approved of the site
of-
plan, and it's required for the zone.
yeah.
If you got a PDC out there that doesn't have a site plan or elevations attached to it, it's not hasn't fully complied with the ordinance. It has to come back with those elevations in that site plan. And I think go through the public hearing again, give the opportunity for residents to comment on those issues.
I just don't understand why we're doing it.
We aren't completing a public hearing when we change a zone.
No, I'm not talking about changing.
I
We're talking
know,
about existing.
right, but when it goes into that zone originally, you don't have,
They didn't have the
you didn't
plan.
have a public hearing. There wasn't anything required until you get the site plan.
When you.
Is there a, is that a,
Commercial,
So when it was originally zoned, I mean, it would have had a public hearing, but because it's planned development, it's considered a zoning decision or a legislative decision. And state law says if it's a legislative decision, you're going to have a public hearing. And so that's why with a PDC, you've got a site plan that comes in on a parcel that didn't have a site plan before. We see it as a zoning amendment. And that's the way that the revised chapter treats it as well, is for all those parcels out there that were approved as PB without a site plan, they need to come in again and comply with the amendment process. And I understand that there's some, concern there, but from a political and a legal standpoint, I think the intent of the state law is to give people a voice, a chance to speak about legislative decisions that are being made. But it is, it's a little unusual when it's just a site, it's a single parcel. I hear the question there, but that's where the state law falls is, if it's a legislative decision, we're going to have a public hearing.
but it doesn't happen in most of the other communities. So it's something really that's unique to Santa Clara.
Well, but not necessarily. St. George has a similar process.
They don't do it with public, they have the hearing with the city council and the planning commission.
I can recall the South Block, everything out the South Block on the Sitla side got approved as a PDC or PDR without site plans and elevations. And then as those parcels have come in and developed, they've had to go back and amend the zone to include those site plans.
Well, what I'm saying, if you're amending a zone or changing a zone, I understand why you're having the public hearing.
I don't want to cut them off.
But if you're just doing what is a permitted use within the zone, I don't understand why we're having anyone other than the planning commission or the city council review that in a public hearing. I can see the public.
Well, the public hearing is only at the planning commission.
Well,
The
Danny?
public hearing for PDC to amend a plan isn't a public hearing at city council. It's only a planning commission, right?
what was it called when we had the meeting on the,
Dollar Tree?
no, yeah, the Dollar Tree?
That was me allowing public comment during the meeting. It wasn't a public hearing. And I don't have to, the way I understand it.
Right. As long as there's been a public hearing at the planning commission, you don't have to do.
I don't have, it's not an advertised public hearing. That's why I make them fill out the orange slips so that it's a public comment. We have public comment on our agenda every time at the front. And basically what I'm doing is delaying that public comment to the item and giving them an opportunity to comment on the item. We don't have to. And I kind of try and explain to them if they abuse it. And I've shut them off before in other public hearings where it gets abusive. Everybody loses.
I
Basically.
think also the reason we have the situation that you're talking about, Denny, is because those designations were handed out at some point in the past without that site plan approval. So if someone came in today and said, hey, I've got this property, it's zoned whatever, R110, and I want to zone it PDC, we wouldn't give them the PDC designation unless they had an accompanying site plan. And that's what the revisions to the ordinance also clarifies as well, that we wouldn't do that. The issue we have is we've got all these currently existing PDC, parcels that are out there that haven't had that site plan approval. And so they haven't fully complied even with our existing ordinance to have that zone vested. And so essentially that's the way we decided to treat them, is that we felt like the most appropriate way was when they came in with a site plan, treat it just like a zoning amendment. So even though the designation is not changing, they're coming in and saying, this is the site plan that I want vested with my zoning. And so we have to go through a zoning amendment process, which includes that public hearing at the planning commission level. So
Danny, they're having trouble getting you on the recording with the mic.
Ready to hear it.
If you just pull your mic a little closer to you, please. Thank you.
But and some of that's inherent too in the difference between the traditional commercial zone and the PDC zone. Traditional commercial zone, like you said, once you got that designation, as long as your use is on the list, you go and apply for your building permit. But the PDC is obviously a different animal. So we're trying to make it work with the sort of strange, situation that we've got going on right now with all these unplanned PDCs.
But I know it may appear a little awkward, but I like it because it lets us, we changed everything from commercial to PDC years ago, this blanket across the board. And that made it so all those PDCs would have to come back in with their site plan and their building elevations through a public hearing process before they could entitle a building permit. If they were all commercial, they don't have to come back here. That's a staff approval. So you're basically saying to the staff, make sure it meets the ordinance. If it meets the ordinance, it's going through and the public doesn't get the opportunity for comment. And I think with our commercial pieces located, dispersed throughout the city, so close to residential areas, I think that creates problems.
Well, and we have a perfect example of that we just dealt with. So at Jim's RV.
Jim's RV.
Yeah.
So being able to have the PDC out there saying, hey, this is the process you're going to go through to get your site plan and your building elevations approved, and it's going to include a public hearing. Maybe burdensome on the applicant, but it at least notifies the residents of what's going in there before they can actually go out and start building.
In my mind, we ought to take the commercial zone then and do away with it because it doesn't require that.
Right.
And therefore, when somebody gets a zoning and it's a commercial PD, they need to be aware that they have to go through that process. process and that they're not just buying a commercially zoned piece of property.
Yeah. I actually think there's a lot of worth in what you're saying, but
I do too.
it's for the council to decide.
I think the public hearings have been beneficial, though. I think in the case of the Sitla property down here, I think there was a win for both the developer and the residents there. I think for the city as well. I think aesthetically, that's going to be a great project for the, I think what that went through, even though it was burdensome for the applicant, I think in the end of the day, it's going to be a better project. So I do look at this, and I think in the project that came through council last week, you've got a PDR zone and a partial zone with a residential low density, trying to combine those. And that is where I think as a council, we've got to look at this, because the commercial zones, I get that I'm all for the PDC, letting them bring in the elevations. We have limited property for that. And we know what the city wants to look like. We know what we're hearing from the residents. We need commercial, but I think we'd much rather see the elevations come through and have approval, just because there is a limited amount in there. It's not big box. And so I do like what we're doing and the changes we're making.
Well, that only took us 30 minutes, so we're going to be here
Sorry
a
to
while.
open a can of worms. This is why I sent this a week ago.
And by the way, I've tried to kind of streamline Lena's comments, and I don't want to take the microphone from you at all, Lena. Feel free to jump in at any time, but like I said, just trying to streamline here. But she suggested, so we've got a use table that says here are the uses that are okay, here are the prohibited uses. We've got a catch-all category that says any other use that is consistent with the intent and purposes of this chapter. And she wondered, should we have that? Should we kind of open up the window a little, or open up the door to other kinds of uses? Shouldn't we be clear about what's prohibited and what is allowed? So just wanted to get your thoughts on whether we should have that catch-all category. Just really quickly, it's nice because it gives us flexibility. Somebody comes in with a good plan and has a good idea, but maybe it's not specifically allowed under our table. It gives us some flexibility there, but there is some uncertainty there. So if you're a developer, you don't know, you have a great idea, but you're not sure if the council, if the planning commission and the council are going to go for it. So there is some uncertainty there for a developer. But any thoughts on catch-all category?
I just think it's too subjective. We have, I mean, if you look at our uses compared to other cities' ordinances, we include a lot of uses that a lot of other places don't. They might have 10 or 12 of them, and we're very detailed. And if you read through them, I think we pretty much cover the gamut of about everything in our uses that we would want to have, in my opinion. So saying, oh, if it's a similar thing, well, who determines if it's, I don't know. It's just subjective.
Has a project ever gone through based on that other?
Not that I know of.
Well,
Yes, Jim's RV is the example.
so Greg Ince
Yeah,
changed that zone to commercial.
No, but this is in the PD
correct,
ordinance. So it
correct.
wouldn't apply to Jim's.
correct. But it's the same idea.
Same idea, but in the PD ordinance, have we ever used
Correct.
that in the PD ordinance?
Not that I know of,
And probably eliminate it and not hurt anything.
my opinion. I'm just one person, but that's my opinion.
And like I say, not, the commercial thing's a separate thing, but
Yes.
in the PD, the part you lose is if you've got one that's not listed.
Right.
So if we've got some use out there that doesn't fall into any of those, and I know in my work history, we run into those once in a while where you can't fit it in one of them. You almost have to go ask somebody, what is this going to be classified as? Or if we haven't used it, take it out. And we may have to amend the ordinance to allow the Cabela's to come in or something.
Exactly. Yep. Okay.
Gotta fit
One
in
of the- one
something,
of the-
doesn't it already?
We'd figure that out.
So kind of along the same lines, Lana has pointed out, under the current plan development chapter, there's not a set maximum density for a residential component in a vertical mixed-use building. So we're not going to see a lot of those. So it's a little rare, but also, you know, the ordinance basically says that the planning commission can set the maximum residential density for that component. So if you've got this, you know, a vertical building, you've got commercial on bottom or something and residential on top. Just wanted to give the council a chance if you want to talk about maximum density for residential components.
Don't we have minimum square footage on the residential stuff? Or is that just in the mixed use ordinance? Mixed use has it, right, Corey?
Yes, I believe so.
This is the one Herb always used to argue for.
Yeah.
To reduce them smaller.
Yeah,
Didn't
there's
we
a-
used to have a 1,250 square foot minimum.
I think it's smaller than that now. In the like the downtown mixed use, I think you can drop down to 800 or something. And I was thinking if you had one, that would probably cover you because the size of the unit could control the density.
That's true. Yeah, that might be a good way to do it.
And maybe it doesn't need to be addressed. We had just addressed it horizontally. So I'm thinking, well, if we're addressing it horizontally, why aren't we addressing it vertically rather than just leaving it arbitrary?
I think, yeah, if we had, and I think it's in the mixed use or the historic district, one of the two, has those minimum square footages. If we had those in here, that would take care of it. The trick is that they're doing smaller ones. The industry is moving into a smaller footprint and the millennials and the younger guys are wanting that. Do we want to let that unit size come down a little bit to allow it? That would be the question I would have is how small do you want to have a residential unit be in a mixed commercial building?
So would you tie it back to the mixed use zone too then?
I think I'd just go get that language out of the mixed use and put in the PDC. But what council should be looking at is how small do you want to go?
I'm curious what St. George has done. I mean, they have some recent development that's just like this. I have no idea, but I'm curious.
Yeah, like the downtown stuff.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
like Jewel Plaza.
Yeah.
It may be worth looking at that as you go back to planning commission with it and see. Because I could see, I mean, Herb was always talking about doing the mom and pop downstairs, residential upstairs, and, you know, a studio, something maybe big enough. I mean, I've seen a lot of 400 square foot residential homes on the league tours in Salt Lake that would probably be fine upstairs in a commercial building and satisfy a need in the market and provide possibly more affordable housing for that group. So
700 square feet.
that's what's in there now.
Mhm. Unless otherwise recommended by the planning commission.
We rely on good planning commission. That's one way you could handle it is to go to a square footage. That would control your density.
All right, any other comments on that?
Sorry, Devin.
No, this is,
No, this
I-
is the discussion we need to have.
this is really good discussion. These are the discussions that should be happening about ordinances. This is really helpful. Last comment was about the colors. Do we want to require earth tone colors for PDR density bonuses?
Can we? It seems silly to me. Am I the only person who thinks that? So if I love craftsman style homes, I'm just giving you my opinion. I love craftsman style homes. So if we have a developer who wants to come in a PDR and build, again, it's not a home, but build his units so that they look more craftsman style, they may be white with a navy or a gray or a red door or whatever. They're beautiful. They're not appealing. Plantation style.
That
Take
actually
your pick,
looks
right?
Swiss. I
Right?
mean, just saying.
But they're not earth. You can't build those and have them be earth tone and look good. So I'm just saying, I don't know that we need to say to them, you can only build earth tone.
Well, and if you,
Just my
if you
opinion.
pull up the definition of earth tones, you'd be shocked at what colors come up. So then who's defining
The color.
the earth tone?
I actually.
We run into this in Entrada.
I actually did that.
I mean, I look at Entrada and we look across green grass and black lava fields and white snow canyon and red cliffs and blue sky and white capped Pine Valley Mountain. That's so who's telling me I can't do this color, but so it's brown and
Orange.
is brown the only color? I mean, it's brown and red. I mean, ultimately you get the
Yeah.
old timers. Sorry, Denny, that's not directed at you, but
You haven't seen
brown and red is earth tone to those are the only earth tone colors. So I totally agree with Lane. I think we're missing a very good opportunity with some craftsman style looks that actually would look better as a Swiss theme in our downtown and neighboring communities. So
And it's just a PDR. So it's not like you're going to see white everything everywhere, right? We know white stucco turns orange. I get it. But
and by the way, it's more money to build the style she's talking about. So we're actually double whammying. Well, hey, go throw some brown stucco out
I agree
there.
with you guys.
just
I've
gonna-
found a lot of blue rocks and yellow rocks. That's an earth tone, right?
right.
Okay. I don't know. I think the density bonus is more about the architecture to me than
Agreed.
if it looks good and they're bringing in their elevation. So you're going to see what it's going to look like.
Agreed. More about the materials they're putting aesthetically on the outside than the color of it, is my view.
And they're going to all pull their doors and put red ones on when we walk away anyway.
And I know you want to avoid the extremes, but I also want to make sure that the preferences of the city fathers is not the only thing that's allowed. I mean,
Yeah, leave that designer the ability to come up with something
Right.
that works.
Right.
Awesome.
I was talking about Matt,
Hmm.
the city father.
He gets younger every week when he comes in here. You notice that?
Okay. Well, like I said, I did my best to try to kind of package this up for council discussion. Did I leave anything out, Lena, that you wanted to discuss with the council?
I don't think so. The only other thing that I had in what I had sent out earlier were just some of the uses on the use chart where I saw you would change some just because we didn't allow like accessory buildings, but we had height, and I saw you'd made those adjustments. But like no recreational buildings in a PDR zone was one thought I had. And the examples they gave were gyms and theaters. I don't know that we want gyms and theaters in our PDR zone. So I'm not sure why they were, because I think they were listed as conditional uses. I think they should be not permitted. Anyways, there just were a few of those, but
If we change the no commercial use in there, does that cover that one? Would recreational building, a gym or a theater both be a commercial use, right?
yes,
They're both
we
commercial
would just have to
business.
actually change the actual table to reflect it I think
Yeah.
to reflect it appropriately in the table.
We
Yeah, we'll make
talked-
that
We
consistent.
discussed eliminating the commercial uses inside the PDR.
Correct.
Correct,
So that would take care of that.
Yeah.
correct.
Yep, we'll make that table consistent. So, okay, and then one last comment that Bob Nicholson, I think, sent an email to the mayor on has to do with landscaping in commercial developments. He wondered if the council wanted to allow some flexibility in the landscaping requirement. Currently, we require landscaping in between the property line and the setback. And depending on where, or excuse me, the curb and the setback, depending on where the right of way is, that can be large section of ground, it can be smaller. So he wondered if it might make sense to allow the planning commission and the city council some flexibility in setting that distance. So it could be 10 feet if the applicant has also landscaped the side frontage as well, for example, to kind of make up for the difference.
Lets them move that landscape strip from the front setback to within the project.
Okay.
Right?
Right.
Like if he's got landscaped islands out in the parking lot or a landscape plaza,
Right.
that could count in exchange for his landscape strip that's paralleling the street.
Exactly. A minimum of 10 feet, but yeah, you've got to have other elements that sort of
Sure.
compensate for that difference if you're going to bring it down to that 10 feet. Yeah.
That helps on problematic sites
Mhm.
where you're limited space-wise, smaller sites, having those big strips and requiring the big strip out there. It limits what you can do behind it. Sometimes if you can expand into that strip a little bit with your parking area, you can do better quality landscaping other places on the site. St. George does that, I think. It'll allow you to move that around inside your site to benefit the site.
Mhm. Yeah.
He recommended, well, just basically what you said, that landscape strip required in a section shall not be less than 10 feet in width, and where other landscaping is provided outside the front setback area or street side setback area, the PCCC may approve landscape strip of not less than 10. Where they determine the additional landscaping elsewhere, the site compensates for reduced landscaping within the front setback. I'll expect the attorney to reduce the words. I know that's hard for you.
Yeah. It is
So,
hard.
so if I understand what Bob's saying, he's not saying we change the default, but he's saying let's give the planning commission, the city council to approve a minimum of 10 feet if they provide some elsewhere. So we're just
little-
adding an exception.
It's an exception
Not
to give a
changing the
little bit of
default.
flexibility in your site plan,
Yeah.
and location of your landscape.
That's probably-
Unless we want big landscape strips on our streets in our commercial areas. You don't have them anywhere in town right now.
And the only problem I have with that is the maintenance of those becomes the responsibility of the owner
Mhm.
and not, that doesn't always work out, and then it becomes the responsibility of the city. And to me, I would like to keep it where it's minimal.
I think his wording would go along better with the recent changes we just talked about in the PDC.
I think so.
Everybody okay with that? Agree with that?
Those were the main points that I had to discuss tonight. Any questions from the council for us?
I think, Jarrett, you said earlier you had some comments and thoughts.
Yeah, just a couple of quick things. So one area that was problematic with the Dollar Tree going in was in the code that's current now. There was a section down at the very bottom that dealt with when there's a big plan and someone comes and piecemeals out a section, how you deal with that. And I felt like it was kind of a shortcut to kind of circumvent a lot of things in the code above. I just wanted to make sure, has that been removed? And now it's just saying if you do anything, you have to come back and do your public hearing, you have to show elevations, your site plan, all that. Am I understanding that correctly?
That's correct. We've clarified what needs to happen if you don't have a site plan that's associated with your PDC parcel to develop, you need to go through the full zone change amendment process, which would include a public hearing and so on to do that. Now, there are some circumstances, if a developer is making small changes and we define the parameters for those changes, the planning commission can actually approve small changes. But no, if somebody's got a blank slate and wants to develop, they need to go through the whole process to do that.
Okay. Okay, very good. And then on the landscaping requirements north and south of the river, have we resolved that yet? I know it came up in planning commission and it's been asked a couple times, like why we have that. Is it a water issue? Is it, I don't know, it just seems like you could end up with kind of a weird development south of the river that has no landscaping, right? It's a maximum of 25% or a very super minimal landscaping. And so it almost felt like there's this, again, it's kind of that valley versus the heights mentality that the heights has to, anyways, I don't want to go into that, but
Which
just-
section are you in, Jared?
it's in the landscaping section. Well, let's see, it's in one of the charts.
Yeah, so it's at the end, and actually, Jarrett, I had asked around and I couldn't find anybody that knew why there was a distinction, and so I've actually proposed to delete the distinction. Although that table that you're looking at, Jarrett, it's at the very end, and it's page 11. I need to delete that reference to south of the river, north of the river, because we've just kept it all the same. Again, mainly because I couldn't find anybody that knew why we were distinguishing between the two. But again, if there's anybody here who feels strongly about it, obviously we could keep that distinction. But in the current draft, that's deleted, and I do need to update that table. So thanks for that
Okay.
catch there, Jarrett.
Let me ask a question, and applies to property south of the river, maybe the South Hills, if we ever get to do anything with it. Can undisturbed open space count as landscape?
Yeah, let me see.
It's a good question.
The reason I ask is that out there with the clay soils, you would probably be better for the stability of the slopes and the structures if you strengthened up your preservation of your undisturbed open space and let them use that as landscaping instead of requiring them to landscape it. Because the geotechnical, and this goes for the heights too. The heights is a little different. In fact, there's nothing undisturbed except maybe the hillsides. But every geotech report I've ever read on the heights tells you to limit your landscaping. And yet we mandate 25%.
Well, and I have to wonder if that was the reasoning behind that distinction for the South Hills where it is undisturbed, and in the context of landscaping not being undisturbed ground. But
I think you can get
I can't
the
imagine
same,
why else there would be that distinction.
the open space can provide a benefit, maybe not as much as the grass for coolness and trees, but it can provide that open space benefit. So the whole thing isn't structure or concrete.
Yeah.
Um,
Under the current draft, I just checked on your question, Mayor. It does include natural spaces.
But I think we'd want to make sure they were preserved in that natural state and not masqueraded and replanted that never comes back like the natural state
Yeah.
or requires water to get it established. Something to that effect.
I'll look at that.
Okay, and then another question I had was with that landscaping percentage, and again, this goes back to a lot of what the residents have come to me with Bucks going in and with the Dollar Tree going in. A lot revolves around, well, how pretty is it going to be? How much green space is there? How does that really work? How much space between, my house and the building, things like that. So I'm curious, because it came up in the planning commission meeting, I believe, and even our city council meeting, that with almost like we set a bad example with Harmon's, like we let a couple of things slip through with that big project, and now we're making these smaller projects adhere to the actual code. And so then it made it feel like, well, the city is going to just let this one slide too. They let Harmon slide through. And so does anyone know, like, does Harmon's have 25% landscaping with their site plan? I don't think so. Looking over there, there's so minimal landscaping on that site
Corey?
for how big it is.
Probably not.
Well, I believe that we did the open space, the parking area.
Yeah,
Or landscape.
does it state landscape or is it open space? Does this go back because it's,
This is kind of the problem, the confusion.
yeah, because after we went through all that, I drove all over town and I couldn't find a commercial project around in any city that had if you mandated 25% landscape, you wouldn't have any commercial space because you'd take 25% landscape, you're going to chew up the parking requirements, and it's going to leave you a zero for building. So I don't believe that what's getting said is the 25% open space is getting referred back to landscape. And I just don't think that's what's intended. 25% landscape it's a lot of landscape,
Mhm.
talking 10,000 square feet of landscape per acre.
Yes, I think that's what the confusion was with the Dollar Tree and And then referring back to Harmon's is, it was open space requirement that they met. And they had a landscape design.
And the open space in your draft is not applicable. We don't have an open space requirement for a PDC. We don't have an open space requirement, but the landscaping requirement is still there at 25%.
And that needs to be verbalized as to the change. I don't think landscaping is the verbiage you want to use for the 25%.
Yeah, we've made it clear. So under the current version of the chapter, it's a straight open space requirement. And under the current version, a parking lot could be included if you're talking about a commercial development. Under this current revision, we've just stated clearly that this open space requirement does not apply to a commercial development. Now, there is a landscaping requirement that does apply to commercial development, though, just for the benefit of residents who are concerned about the aesthetics. In section 68.40, there is a requirement under the landscaping section. If you've got a parking lot with 30 or more spaces in it, at least 5% of it has to have landscaping, interior parking lot landscaping. So some features to make it look nice, but you're just not going to see 25%
So,
for commercial
so
development.
I'm with Jarrett. How does, I mean, I read that too. It's number B. But the question is how does that relate to the table then? Because I think some people are just going to go to the table and look at the
Yeah.
table and they're not going to read the actual verbiage. So when you go to the table, it says you have 25%.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll have to look at that. We have dealt with the open space. Let me look at that landscape question as well, Jarrett.
It's going to come down.
Yeah, it needs to come. So I will look at that as well. Is there a percentage that the council wants to look at for, or are we okay with that? I think the intent was to have just that requirement for larger parking spaces for commercial developments, that they have at least 5% be landscaped.
Do you get your commercial zone?
Mhm.
What, is it a requirement in the commercial zone? Landscaping?
Well, there's a requirement at the street, and that's what was discussed. So that's where you run into issues with this, because if you've got the parking lots and you're requiring a 10-foot sidewalk, where does that landscape buffer now go? Is it, if it's 10 feet, it sounds like 10 feet out front, obviously around the perimeters, you can make that work, but I like the 5%. If you exceed a certain amount, that's going to give you landscape planters, in the parking lot, places for trees.
Doesn't specify in the zone.
Doesn't specify in the straight commercial.
So that was the intent, was to impose that 5% requirement for these larger commercial parking lots. I'll update that table to make it consistent. So that's clear.
Okay, and then I think my last question is kind of the rumor going around in my neighborhood is that the city council is ramming this through to benefit future commercial projects in my neighborhood. And so I'm just curious with when this will all come down consistent with what projects are coming up before us. So Buck's Ace is a prime example. When I was happy to see the public hearings going through. That's going to help my constituents feel better about the process, that we're not trying to circumvent all this. But I guess my question is something like Bucks, something like, somewhere else right there on Pioneer Parkway that comes up, are they going to be under the current code? Are they going to be under what we're changing right now? How's all that going to play out?
Under the law, when their application is deemed complete, the ordinance in place is what they have to meet.
That's right.
Right? But some of them that are out there may want to wait till this is done before they vest a complete application. because of some of the, especially this minimum landscape area.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, they're gonna, and it's gonna appear to your residents that you rammed it through before. But I think what you've got to do is you got to look at this, forget a project. Is this what we want? Or do we want to mandate 25% landscaping and commercial and not get any? So,
Well, I don't think we mandated it. I don't think the 25% has been, I don't think it's ever
Hasn't been
been.
adhered to.
hasn't been
before.
No, but I don't think that was ever the intent, because I think when you go back to, I think the table says that, but if you go back to,
doesn't really say it in the text.
yeah, it spells it out as a 5%. I think obviously it's the intent that when you get into these larger projects, and that's where Harmon's would have come in, to meet the 5%.
It's just hard to answer your question because we're correcting, we're doing some house cleaning is what I look at it in this ordinance, is we're looking at some problematic areas and we're trying to correct it to better meet what we want and what we've been granting. And so it's not necessarily done for any one, but you'll definitely see the ones that are sitting out there take advantage of the changes that we make if they can. That's,
Well, and for the residents for Bucks Ace, I mean, that's on for the next planning commission. So that'll fall under, the guidelines that are in place now, but I can assure you there's not an intent to adhere to 25% landscape. Otherwise we would get a 10,000 square foot Ace Hardware with a paint department. So that's where, and that's the problem with the way that's written, is I literally went out after that meeting we had and just said there's no way this was ever intended to, with land value and properties, and you just wouldn't, and your parking, I mean, your restrictions on parking are, so.
that answer your question?
I think so, yeah. So that's probably just more of a warning for the council and for the planning commission that
Sure.
if we want pitchforks, we get this done really, really quick. If not, if we want to, have the right perception of the public, we need to take our time with it, maybe see it a couple times, whatever we need to do to make sure it really is right. And then it's not like we're rushing to get it done. I think that's the perception, that we're rushing it right now. And it helped a lot that we tabled it last week. I think that went a long ways with the citizens. So we could come and really look at it. And so I like the direction it's moving. We just have to be careful.
Well, I think it's safe to say too, with the changes that we're talking about and the changes that Devin's already put in here since the planning commission looked at it, the planning commission is going to have to look at it again at this point. So, I think it'd be hard for anyone to truly characterize this as being rushed through,
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
And I think the changes are proposed because of I think there is a lot of, uncertainty on, okay, Jim's RV just goes right through, and others have to come through public hearings and things like this. This just kind of streamlines as far as, okay, this is what's required for the commercial process. And I think at the end of the day, it's a huge benefit for the residents that live adjacent to commercial. So.
And I think we should have a further discussion on doing away, it's not for tonight, but doing away with the actual commercial zone and just abiding by a PDC ordinance.
Yeah.
I agree.
So,
And I think just thinking ahead on that a little bit, I think there's two ways that you do that. The simplest way would essentially be to adopt a new ordinance that says we're not going to grant any further zone changes to commercial, but all that are existing commercial are essentially vested under the existing ordinance. The more difficult way would be to essentially involuntarily rezone everything to PDC.
We did that last time.
Yeah, I mean,
Alien didn't have a
I'm not
problem
saying
with
you can't do it, but I think there's issues with that approach. So,
well, we only have 3 or 4 commercial
not very many.
pieces.
right.
So it's just making sure going forward that we do away with it. Doesn't make sense.
Yeah. And that would be, like I said, it'd be a very simple ordinance that you would adopt. I think just saying, essentially, this is now a grandfathered zone and we're not going to approve anymore. So,
Well, and if we want to encourage transparency and the citizens feeling like we are transparent,
So
we ought to have a couple of public meetings with the citizens to make decisions as to what they would like to see done in the city of Santa Clara, rather than us waiting for somebody to present something to us and then we change or revise. It would be nice to sit down and say, here's the PDC zone, here's the PD zone, commercial, residential, here are the uses. How do you feel about it? What do you want to see done in Santa Clara? I mean, to me, that brings more transparency to it than a public hearing on reviewing something that's already proposed.
Denny, would you propose in doing that to come to that conclusion of having like neighborhood meetings with the council there? We invite, either go into that neighborhood or invite directly here, or just at city council having,
One of the problems is you've got COVID, so until you get the green light and you can have a bigger meeting, you'd have to do neighborhoods and with the smaller groups. To me, you know, if it was open, you could go into the school with a big meeting or a number of locations that you could find and present it there and let them review it, as did Jeff Winston with Division Dixie and so forth. That planning process brought transparency to the whole area. And to me, that's, my mind, that's the way to look at, if we're going to go away with commercial zones and just go to PD, is that really what we want to do? And take it to the public and ask them. But
I think it's the neighborhood meetings and when you're talking the general plan and you're talking about specific land use in specific parts of town, it can be a great thing and you get a great input. I think you get less input when you just take a zoning ordinance that may or may not impact that area, and you try and get feedback, solicit feedback from them on an ordinance when they don't see the application to where they live. But having said that, we can look at the general plan anytime people want, and while we got them in there, we can bounce ordinance input off of them.
and it's like the mobile home zone. Before we had those meetings, there were mobile homes that could come into the Santa Clara area, and in the meetings, they determined they didn't want that as a permitted use in any of the zones. So mobile homes were taken out of Santa Clara.
Yeah, you
Those
could,
are the kind of things.
that's actually, you can't zone out mobile homes.
Pardon?
You can't zone out mobile homes.
manufactured
Yeah.
homes.
What's that?
Already.
You did?
Can you find that in your zone?
Yeah,
You
manufactured.
got a
homes.
stick built with it, you don't have the mobile home that can portably be brought in.
Well, before 1967, but a manufactured home, yeah, you have to allow them as long as they meet the zoning order. Well, as long as they meet the CCNR. So
And they got
we don't enforce that.
the roof pitch and
Roof
there's some
pitch
other
and,
things
yeah,
come into
St. George
play.
had that big issue over there where they tried to bring in a manufactured home to the Bloomington Hills, and the guy that brought it in had to put block on the and tile roof and build up, so it would meet the surrounding neighborhood and not bring down the property value.
Well, we had the same issue here.
Yeah.
The Johnsons brought in a manufactured home on their acreage where they put the tennis courts and stuff.
old battery here.
It was because it had a building code number that had been built. Oh, almost when I charged. And it was structural, stick built, manufactured rather than mobile. Then we had to go out.
Yeah, the feds won't let you just say blanket, no mobile homes in your zone.
We could look at that if COVID makes it so hard.
Yeah, okay.
So Devin, when you take this back to planning commission after your changes, because there's enough changes to go back to them, will they re-hold a public hearing? If not, then can I recommend they rehold a public hearing, but do it here in this setting to get as many people as they can to come?
They've held the legally required one, but yeah, they can certainly hold another one.
I believe last time they heard that, they said that when they came back, they wanted to have a public hearing, the planning commission did. So,
Okay. Any other comments, Devin?
That's all I had. Thanks for your time.
Questions or
Feedback.
comments, council?
I was just going to add, I felt like how they named the mascot over at Dixie State, that process was a really good template if we want to get good feedback from people. I went to one of those meetings. There was like 12 people around the table. We got a little presentation from Jordan Sharp, and we said yes or no, and like my vote didn't go through, but I'm totally happy with the process because I saw how transparent it was, and that I still got to be part of that process. And so maybe a smaller meeting is the ideal scenario for a general plan discussion, where you really can get a little more feedback from people and present a few more concrete ideas before them. So just my feedback on that.
And we got a lot of feedback last time we changed the general plan on the South Hills. It was a long process to do that. So we can look at it as things, especially if things will open up and we can start having a neighborhood open house
It really is tough to do anything right now.
that's effective. You can do it, but you're not going to get the effective feedback you're looking for, I don't think. Okay, thank you, Devin. Appreciate you. Okay, go back to start. Matt, or do you want to address any of these others?
I was just going to excuse myself unless there's something you felt like you need me for. So I was here for.
The number 5 and number 6 before the attorneys leave. What's that discussion pertaining to?
that would be the tabled general plan amendment to the assisted living.
And what did you want to talk about?
The city council wanted to discuss the general plan and whether it was appropriate to change those general plan designations.
Okay. So is it just, how do we individually feel about it? An overall discussion?
That's what was suggested in city council when we were hearing the item. The item was assisted living.
The item's not on the agenda. No, the assisted living is not on the
No.
agenda.
No. So the discussion,
So it has to be a general discussion.
yes, it's a general discussion that what we understood the council wanted discussion, how the process that we were going about, is that the process we want of doing the general plan amendment? Do we take that process when the general plan is already set forth, as the discussion was, it already says it's general plan to low density. We want to come in and make those general plan changes to things that residents may have moved to those places based on the general plan. Do we want to make those general plan changes that might to them feel they've been council or the city hasn't been forthright or honest with them and what they're going to allow in that area?
So you guys got to jump in here. Do we want to have a discussion on prohibiting any amendments to the general plan?
I don't mind jumping in on this, Mayor, because I've been over there. The concern I had in this, as this came through, I thought this was closer to the corner piece, which to me actually makes a lot of sense. It's already zoned PDR. The problem with this piece is you're cutting off about 2.5 acres, maybe a little more. Actually, I think it's more. I was just pulling up on there's actually 6.5 acres there that's, and part of that I think ends up in the river and part of the road and things like that, but that is zoned low density residential. That's also adjacent to a 2.5 acre field that at some point is going to be residential. Then adjoins to the church-owned orchard and the bridge and then in the new development, and you've got residential across the river. So the concern for me is, where do you draw that line? It came in at, I mean, I believe I have no issue with assisted living. I think it's a great use of a PDR zone or a PDC zone. I think it's great down there, but it does continue all the way through into a zone that, frankly, if I was a landowner right there expecting low density residential, watching sycamores across the river build out, I would be somewhat frustrated there, because, and Benelli comes all the way up through there and ties in. So I think the question as a council is just, if they come in for a zone change to go from low density residential to PDR for the project, and then the field to the east, and eventually the church sells their orchard or whatever, where does that line, where do we draw the line? Because there are a lot of uses in the PDR zone that, if those get rezoned, that back up to a lot of adjacent residential.
I don't, my only question is the way it's advertised, we're not talking about a specific project.
It's general plan. Yeah.
The public doesn't know what we're talking about.
Yep.
You're not being very transparent right here at the moment.
So let me see if I can. Very low density residential means that we're, what, at 4 units per acre? Is that what, very low, or is it 3 units per acre?
It's
Two.
two dwellings units an acre.
And this is in a residential area where there's a lot of agriculture. But we're talking about, in my mind, the general plan. This could happen in anywhere within the city where we've got an existing zone and they want to change a zone. We need to have a review process. I hate to go from 2 dwellings per acre to 12, which we could have with a PD residential and mixed use, because it affects the existing lot ownerships and the values of property. We have to look at that as a city and determine what we're going to do. Are we going to take a low density area and create it and make it a high density area with not respect to what's already existing? To me, it's something we need to review and maybe make some determinations with the help of the public as to what they would like to see. But I don't feel good about changing from very low density to, it could be high density, without the effect that it's going to have on the people there. Because we're not just approving a use, but we're approving a change of use. And to me, that needs to be reflected in our discussion.
And that's why the general plan amendment process and the
Right.
public hearing, everything happens to
Right.
facilitate that.
And I don't disagree with what you said, Denny, but I also think we have to be a little bit careful to answer your question, Mayor. A general plan's only typically redone every 5 to 7 years. So you could have requests come in between that 5 to 7 year period. And I don't think we want to take the position that we say, if you come in with, at least, I don't know that I do, to take a position to say, if you come in with any request at all in between that 5 or 7 years, we're not going to even consider it.
No, I think. you
And so
consider it, but you consider it openly with input from those particular people that live around it. I mean, I don't think that we make an arbitrary change without involving them in the process.
And I think that's the intent of,
That's-
that's the intent of the public
Yeah,
hearing.
the public hearing is that process.
But
We're
as
gonna,
we heard from the original public hearing, not everybody got. to
sure.
participate.
And that's why we're redoing that public hearing. And I think that,
And those are extenuating circumstances, just given the current situation.
I
really.
think, without COVID, that place could have been a roaring mob
Yes.
at Planning Commission.
Yes. Likely, actually.
And it may be, when's it coming here? Next week?
No, I think they-
22nd?
They're hopeful to have their neighborhood meeting on Thursday, the 9th. So earliest would be, depending if they, at that point we'll have to know then so we can notice for public hearing,
That
22nd the earliest.
the process that you just talked about is the process that I think we're going through. It just had a flaw in it because of COVID. And so we're maybe going over the top and having a public hearing at council to give that opportunity for everybody who couldn't comment at the planning commission. And the comments that they have, it's a public hearing though. They won't have to do the orange form. We'll take them all.
I said this in the last meeting. I think it doesn't hurt to say it again. The nice thing, and in some ways the difficult thing about a request for a change to the general plan is it's a purely legislative decision. So you have no or very little obligation to take the applicant's word for anything on it, as the legislative body, the general plan is the foundation of the land use in the city. So if you like what they're proposing, you can adopt it. If you don't like it, you really don't have to give much reason for saying no. But I mean, that has nothing to do with, of course, you want the public input because you're a representative body. But in terms of your freedom to decide on these questions, you're very free to decide on, and for almost any reason, either yes or no. So that's why I say it's nice, but at the same time, it's difficult because you can't point to one thing and say, well, we had to do this because, it really just comes down to what do you think is the best thing for the city, and then politically have to figure out how to justify it. So.
So question on that is, if, as a legislative body, if we adopted to make a change on that or any other particular parcel, specific to a project, and for whatever reason that project's financing or whatever, that it gets tabled, but it's now been that property's now been PDR or PDC or whatever it has, could because right now, there's a list of things that could go there outside of what gets approved on any of those. So
Well, don't confuse zoning with the general plan.
They're
Right.
two totally different.
Two totally different things.
Okay.
And we haven't even got to the zoning yet. It's just the general plan. If you approved the general plan change, that would enable them to submit a zoning application. You're still going to review that application and those uses and those other things. So they've got to do the general plan. Right now, they can't submit a zoning application that can be considered because it doesn't comply with the general plan.
yeah,
And I guess in my mind, security as to what I built, where I built, if there is no guarantee of the plan being followed, then why would somebody move to Santa Clara? If I'm going to be living in an area that's master planned for 2 units per acre, that's a half-acre lot, and I build mine with that plan in mind, and the legislative authority changes it to a 12-acre per lot, what guarantees have I got as a citizen moving into an area that's been subdivided, be maintained by the plan that's in place? Is there no guarantees?
Is there no guarantee? I mean, what?
Not much.
I
I mean,
think so.
and that's why I say it's almost a purely political question. It's not really a legal question much at all, because, just like the federal legislature can go and adopt just about any law they want, you can do the same thing on these base level land use questions. So legally, there's no guarantee for someone, a resident who, like you said, moves into an area because of that. But as a city council, if you feel strongly about protecting that general plan, then absolutely you can do it, you know, and you don't have any obligation to change it when an application comes in.
But the
And-
property owner has the right to ask.
Yeah, they can ask.
And I think we might be at a point where we could actually, the last time we redid the entire general plan was in 2014. We made the amendments to it when we did the South Hills and modified them for the South Hills, but we haven't looked at anything else since 2014.
Yeah.
So realistically, if we wanted to go in, we're in our window that we could go in and really redo the general plan and hold all those single individual meetings and do what we did if we wanted to do that.
And, you know, Ben's earlier point, I think does have some merit in that if you did decide to change the general plan before you knew what their zone application was going to be, you do open the door somewhat to, you know, getting an application that maybe you don't like. So there's that consideration too. The other thing to consider is the general plan it's ultimately a tool as well. You know, we've talked a little bit before about one of the changes we've made in the PD ordinance is encouraging someone with a large project to use the general plan as a master planning tool. So there's a lot of considerations, but like I said, the main point with everything I'm saying that I want to get through to you is this is a decision that really is totally up to you, you know, unless it's completely arbitrary. You know, you can basically just say, you know, people don't like it, so we're gonna vote no, you know.
There's a reason why we did it that way, and we still believe the reason's valid.
Yeah. And it doesn't take much more, really any more justification than that for a vote either way. So,
And then the zoning application in theory just goes away, right? Because we're not approving the general plan, so the zoning application doesn't become applicable.
that's right.
I think when you said if the people don't like it, then we don't have to do it. I think the most important thing in that comment is the people. We need to have the people involved in what we're doing. And in this last experience we had last week, the people weren't involved at all. At least the ones that I talked to.
Well, and
They-
we'll see. Hopefully, we've given them another opportunity
Right.
to get involved.
I realized we did that, and that's what we should have done.
So hopefully we get them. Hopefully it's a full house.
Yeah, maybe in the banquet room, right? To have enough space.
It's a whole lot easier when it's a full house on a general plan issue.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And so the council knows in our staff meetings, we always, when we have a developer, whether it's a general plan issue or a zoning issue, we always ask them to reach out to the citizens and the surrounding people to get their buy-in and input before they ever go through the process. And so that's just standard.
And these guys were told.
Yeah.
So,
I think I would just add to this discussion that just as my view on this issue is I'm probably with Denny and that we should probably leave a lot of that general plan alone in areas where people already live. If I were in those shoes of people that live there, I would want it to stay what I was expecting. You know, if there's a really good reason to change it, that's why we have that option for someone to come and ask. We should still have that opportunity there. But just in general, if someone comes and asks you staff, like, I think the council is going to approve this change, my position is going to be, we're probably going to leave it the same unless it's really compelling to change it.
and I probably would discourage having them both on the same agenda like they did with planning commission. Probably pretty strongly discourage that.
Yeah, I would agree.
General plan and zone change at the same night.
Yeah.
But if we want to update that or consider updating the general plan and have some neighborhood meetings, maybe the fall, we can set that up.
Can I ask maybe just a historical question? Could someone give me, where is like a project that we've made a change to the general plan? I know we've done some, but what,
The last one we
the
did,
last one specifically that just kind of as a
Sort of a
reference,
minor change,
the edge,
would be
the ones right over here at Jim's RV.
was
I
that
mean-
that general plan change?
General plan change,
Yeah,
It was
that's true
split
because they were
after-
split between the two uses.
Yep.
That's right.
2 uses, and
That's right.
planning commission chose that Main Street commercial was more or less the use that they thought was more prominent.
The last time we went through with general plans that really had a lot of input was the one for the South Hills.
or any of the, like up on the heights, some of the
We had some issues on the heights.
apartment projects and that,
Yeah.
were those a,
When the
viewed as a
the
general
project
plan
that was gonna
change.
go in adjacent to Bella Soul,
Solus.
we had issues with
Solus.
general plan questions because they thought there should have been more open space that was listed in the general plan that they didn't feel like we were.
it was across the wash
Adhering
there? Is that
to.
what that,
Mhm.
okay.
Yeah, that wasn't a general plan amendment,
It wasn't an amendment,
but
but
it was a question of whether what they were
same-
wanting
if
to
we
do
were
complied
following
with the
it,
general plan.
same premise, yeah.
We haven't had a lot of general plan amendments.
Mm-mm.
And that's probably what you want. you
Mhm.
know?
Yeah.
I just trying to, for me, just trying to reference other areas that, this has come up, these type of questions, because there is there's still quite a bit of infill is what I'd call it, a lot of,
That's where I think you're gonna see most of your general plan amendments come or infill.
yeah, there's a lot of land in downtown. There's a lot of,
You're gonna have conversions, existing residences convert, and it may mandate a general plan amendment as part of that. I think that's where we're gonna start seeing them because of there's nothing going on in the South Hills, so that large undeveloped piece is, probably as well leave it alone. The Black Desert piece now is zoned. Everything else in the city is pretty much zoned to match the master or the general plan.
Mhm.
So they're gonna have to change existing plans, or you're gonna have an existing project like a home across the street decide it wants to do something like the bakery. That may mandate a general plan discussion, a hotel, something like that. That's where I think you're gonna see them. So you're not gonna see them very often. Okay, zone change, have we had that discussion too?
Yeah, I believe probably covered all on that one.
All righty. Matt, you stick around for a shooting range discussion. You could end up with a committee assignment. Well, you may want to stay and defend yourself so you don't end up with a committee assignment. But it's up to you, bro. Thank you.
All right.
Okay, back to the front. Bradley, clear in the back. You the gatekeeper tonight?
Yes, he was.
Cemetery policy discussion.
It's nice to be back in front of everybody and see everybody's faces instead of looking at a monitor. Just a quick recap on why we're here talking about this today is we had a family call in and want to do a burial, or the mortuary actually called in and wanted to do a burial, and about 9:30 on Thursday morning. And we didn't have what's called a burial permit from the mortuary at that time. Once we have to have the burial permit in order to start the procedures, to do the research to make sure they have the burial rights. So anyway, according to the ordinance, the way I understood it, and then I've also had Matt look at it, that if there's a burial on Thursday, according to the ordinance, the earliest that we could do it is on Monday in the 48-hour notice. Matt said that when you figure that out, I gave him two examples. One was a Thursday morning burial. I said, what's the earliest we could do that based on the way the ordinance is written? And he said that would be Monday. So we were following the ordinance, but one thing about the ordinance is that it doesn't allow us a way to get around that 48-hour notice. The paragraph, can you bring up the ordinance, please? So first thing we have to do before we can accept a burial, we have to have a burial permit from the mortuary. And once we get that, we can determine if they have the burial right. If they don't have a burial right, then it takes some time to research. Sometimes the burial right belongs to another family member, or maybe they don't own a plot. So that takes a little bit of time. But until we actually get that burial permit in 122470 or that permit, we can't move forward with it. And that was the case on this. They called at 9:30 and wanted to know if we could do a Saturday burial. And I didn't talk to the mortuary. This was all through my assistant. And she told them that we had to have that burial permit. Well, we didn't get the burial permit till about 11 or 11:30. I was gone to a meeting out for the trail on the behind Harmon's there. And then when I came back, I asked my assistant, well, what happened with the burial? And she said, oh, we worked it out. They were going to do it on Monday. And then I didn't know, where the plot or anything like that was at that time because we couldn't verify it because we didn't have the permit. In cases like these, I think if we would look at the 122490, and I'll just read it to you. We talked about it before. It says no graveside service or interment will be allowed in the cemetery on Sunday or any state or federal holiday or any other holidays observed by the city, including Swiss days. That's not a question here. On all the other days, the graveside service or interments will be allowed between the hours of 10 o'clock and 10 a.m. and 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. That's not what's in question here. So we get all graveside services and interments must be arranged through the cemetery superintendent 48 hours in advance of time set, not including any intervening Saturday, Sunday, and holiday. And that's where the problem came in, the intervening Saturday, Sunday, and holiday. My interpretation of that, and I asked Matt afterwards, I didn't ask him about this particular one, this case, but I asked him, what does that mean? And he says, well, you just don't count Saturday, Sunday, or holidays in your 48 hours. So, you count Thursday, Friday, but whatever you end up with. But if you look, if I keep reading, it says any exceptions of the provisions of this section shall be approved by the city council only and will result in payment of additional fees. So there's no way in the way the ordinance is written to allow the city to do a shorter notice unless we bring the city council together and you decide as a group, yeah, we can do this. Well, that's not really practical because you have to have a physical meeting. About 75% of the burials that we do, we need that 48 hours because it takes time to, depending on where it's at, the older the part of the cemetery, the more time it takes. And then as you move along to the newer east side, usually we can do it quicker because there's less monuments and things like that. The new section does have some issues on the south side because there's a lot of rocks and boulders and things, and we run into issues there. But once we get that burial permit and we know what plot and we know that they have a burial right, then we could look at it and we could see, if they wanted to do it shorter, maybe, it's possible. And I believe this one would have been possible to do shorter because it was in the new section, an area that was fairly easy. It had to have some monuments moved, but it was fairly easy to do in that amount of time. So what I would like to propose is maybe discuss how we might be able to make it available to where we could it on a short notice if the location of the plot, is suitable and we feel we can do it in that time frame, that we could be allowed to do it. I know we ran into this before. There was a family similar to this and they were wanting to do a short notice burial, and I don't know if we had this ordinance in place, but I had called the mayor and asked him, can we go ahead and do this? And he said, well, if you think you can get it done, go ahead. I like that. I like to be able to do that, or maybe call the city manager and say, hey. But the thing I don't want to get into is with our employees, I don't want to put them under the gun to try to get something done when it's in an area that takes a long time to get ready. You know, sometimes the middle section of the cemetery, the middle grass section, there's a lot of markers and things that are out of place. There's vaults that are not where they're supposed to be. A lot of times we have to do a lot of research and marking before we even, you know, open the plot. Even we've actually had where we found the body in one of the plots that wasn't on the map, you know. So, you know, we just, you know, it depends on where it is. The farther, like I say, the farther west you go, the more likelihood you need more time, just because there's more bodies and more monuments there. So anyway, if there's a way that we could kind of gauge that based on the location in the cemetery, and maybe have somebody that we could call and say, hey, can we do this? We feel like we can do it, you know, in a shorter time.
Council, are you okay if we change that, requiring the approval of the city council to require the approval of the mayor or the city manager?
Why don't we just take Saturday off that list and just, there was, in this specific case, there was 48 hours notice. If we just take Saturday off that, which is probably the majority of our burials, a large percentage of them. And so why not just include Saturday? It's a cemetery where people are going to be looking for Saturday burials. Why don't, just knowing that if there's a request by noon on Thursday.
Well, I think the concern that we have, staff, and talking with Brad, is kind of what he's talked about is some sections that works. As he stated the one night, that some of them they've had to move up to 18,
Yeah, 17.
17 they had to move. That's a lot to move. Some of the monuments are large. We can't move. We have to get a monument company has to come in and move them. So there are some restrictions that if you go to take Saturday out, and so it's 48 hours, Saturday doesn't get included. I still think if you're trying to do a Saturday burial in the old west section, I don't think that works with what happens. So taking just Saturday out blanket, that old section there's so many monuments and things to move to mark them and get them back. As I've talked with Brad, I don't know that 48 hours works in the old section.
So can you do what he's saying and exempt the Pioneer section? And to your point, I don't have a problem with any of that.
But right now, if they called on a Monday, right now, if it was during the week, they gave 48 hours notice during the week, we don't have an exception. I mean, we make anything work if it's 48 hours in the time we're already doing it. It's just an exception. Like if I submitted on a Tuesday for a Thursday in the middle of the old cemetery, I could do it, couldn't I? Without any problem and removing monuments and that's the way.
Based on the way it's written, yeah, you could do it, you know.
So I guess that's my question.
Could you do it? Not if is it legal under the ordinance, but is it physically possible to do a 48-hour burial in the old section?
It depends. The last time it took a lot longer. It took Ryan said it took him a week, you know, but the burial was on this day. They took a couple of days to have to move everything and a couple of days to put everything back, because they have to measure everything exactly and have to have enough room to get a vault truck in there.
So what do we do now in that situation?
We haven't run into a short notice burial in the old section.
But I mean, if not a short notice, but if
So if they call you, do you tell them it's going to take us 3 days or 4 days before we can do this?
We try to encourage them to delay it, you know, if we can, if it's going to take that long. And most of the families know, you know, what we're up against, because, you know, they're familiar with the cemetery. And it's not just the dirt section, but it's also the first 5 rows or so of the middle section, because the first 3 rows, when you get into there, those are all back to back to back, you know, side to side to side. There's no room in there whatsoever, you know, so those are kind of scary when you have to open one up in between, when they're, you know, you got 500 plots or 100 plots this way, and if one person makes a mistake and they put it a foot off or a half foot off, and then they're, you know, you go to put the monument in there, then it bumps everybody down. So it's just, takes a little time sometimes to probe and, you know, try to find out what you got.
I think
So
you're trying to get Saturday burials a norm.
Well, I'm just right now, by just saying we're gonna authorize without the council part of it, right now, if it's problematic in the old part of the cemetery, I get that. That's problematic, but right now it doesn't specify that anyway. So in looking at this, and the problem in this situation wasn't, it was the Saturday part, which is the part where I look at going, if I'm doing a family get together, it's usually going to be on a Saturday.
We have no problem with Saturday burials. We just would like more notice, you know, for Saturday.
And I guess my hiccup with it is if they called Wednesday night at 5 o'clock when we're here, or they call Thursday morning at 10 a.m., what have you lost? I mean, you've been, not you, and I don't mean you, but
Right.
we're closed. People have gone home. You're not doing anything nobody's doing anything between those hours anyways. So why would we restrict somebody if they're calling Thursday morning and wanting a Saturday burial? In my mind, if they can meet the 48-hour requirement, then meet the 48-hour requirement and do it on Saturday.
I think one of the things too, and I don't disagree with that. I don't. I think one of the things is we need, as Brad's talked about, more so than a phone call. I want to do a burial on Saturday. It's having that paperwork that the process can actually start. And that maybe needs to be written in that document from the mortuary saying, like, here's who it is. This is the plot number, rather than somebody just calling and saying, I want to do a burial. Because they could make that call even on really to the ordinance. It'd be okay, but it could be on Wednesday at 10 o'clock in the morning, and mortuary doesn't send anything until Thursday at 4 o'clock. We can't do anything until we get that information that puts us under the gun to try to do it. So I think that needs to be written in it's not just a phone call of a resident saying, I want a burial, but we need the information from the mortuary.
What,
Because if they would have called even as they did that morning, but what if they never said anything until mortuary didn't say anything until Friday at 4 o'clock? And they want to do it Saturday at 9 a.m. or at 10 a.m. the very first one, and you would have had no time with staff to go out there, get everything moved and dig and put everything in place.
I totally agree with that. I'm just saying, if you take 48 hours on a Tuesday for a Thursday burial, in my opinion, if I got that document to you at 11 a.m., I could have 11 a.m. Thursday burial.
well,
And or could I not?
I think maybe the way it needs to be written is not from that notice, but maybe 48 hours from when the burial rights are verified. In other words, we had a burial last week. We got the notice on Thursday for a Tuesday burial. They were supposed to come in. They had no burial right here. You know, we accepted it. We said, yes, we can do it on Tuesday. Well, they were supposed to come in Friday and buy it. Well, they didn't come in Friday. They come in Tuesday, they came in Monday at 11:30. And so we didn't know where to dig it. I mean, we're ready and waiting for the people to come in. And it was in the new section. They bought, plots in 2,500 row. So we were able to get it done. But I think maybe we should change that to when the burial rights are verified. That way we know what we've got to deal with, rather than doing it when we get the notice. Because part of that time is to determine where they're going to be buried. Some families own 40 plots, which plot, if you own 40, do you want this person in, and there's just a little bit of research that we have to do that takes time. So I would be happy with that if we could maybe tweak that a little bit.
Well, and I also think that being able to call for special permission should be a part of that.
Yeah.
So to me, as far as a council member is concerned, I don't feel like I need to be called, but I do think the mayor or the city manager could be called if they needed special approval. And I just don't see any reason why we couldn't put that in there.
And I'm going to do the same
Yeah.
thing I did last time. I'm going to ask you if you can do it. If you can't do it, then I won't authorize it.
Yeah.
I think that's a big part of it too. I like the suggestion of what you just said, but I think that you have to feel comfortable that you can be able to do it. And I think that needs to be made known. And when the mayor or the city manager gets the call, he needs to ask that question, can you do it? If you can, then I think we ought to make an exception.
Yeah, I'm really concerned when we get in the old section in some of these areas where there's a lot of monuments to move because the guys are moving them with the backhoe and straps. And sometimes if they're too big to move, we've got a provision in there where we can call Kenworthy out or a monument company to come out physically and move it. And those take time, also. We have to have them come out and move it.
So if we change in the ordinance to 48 hours from the time the burial rights are verified.
Right.
So 48 hours. So if the burial rights get verified Thursday at 2:00, they could do a Saturday at 2:00 burial, except for put in there an exemption to the old cemetery.
Or
Like,
just a disclaimer, something to alert them
Yeah.
that the old cemetery takes longer typically.
Yeah. And the
Be advised.
west,
can you
west
take it
half of the
completely?
middle
You
section.
can identify the numbers, however you want to identify there,
Mhm.
just alert them that that section may
By
take longer.
intersection.
Okay.
Bring us back something.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll get it off to Matt for a review before we bring it. So
Do you guys want me to order DoorDash real quick? Anybody hungry? I could have dinner delivered. This could be a long night. So,
Me and Brock talked about this. I'm just waiting for his text.
hey,
I told you about what time I would
He's
send the
the
text.
hunger meter.
Yeah,
He's
he's
got
at
10 minutes
7:30.
and his meter's gonna go off.
yeah, I've got that app right here. They deliver right out front here. Connor would pay for it.
What do we get? Oh, then I'm in.
Yeah, exactly. We'd have wingers delivered right
We're
out.
gonna eat somewhere nice.
Brad, can I ask a question? Just because
Certainly.
I don't know what it means. Where it says full plots and half plots.
We have a couple sections in the cemetery, one in the middle section and then one in the new section where a plot is 4x10, whereas a half plot is 4x5. So you can like do 2 cremations, or you can do a cremation or a infant burial in the smaller plots if
Oh,
you choose.
Any other questions for Brad on that one? Thank you, Brad. Park fee schedule discussion.
So the file that Brock's going to bring up is a different one that was in your packet, I believe. I can't see that, but does that say peak season on it, Brock?
What's that?
Does that say peak season on about the 4th line?
There is a
Left?
peak season,
Okay.
correct?
Yeah.
It's not
And-
the clearest of.
Couple of reasons I brought this in. I wanted to bring in Swiss Pioneer Memorial Park, which is in here, but also we had some discussion last year about April and May and having tournaments. So last year we had turned it away. We wouldn't have any tournaments in those months because what was happening, we were running Little League Monday through Thursday, and then we were running tournaments Friday and Saturday, and there just wasn't enough, field maintenance crews, and it's really hard on the fields. So as an option, what I came in and put in there was a peak season for April and May. So if they're going to play and have tournaments, then they're going to have to pay for extra expenses for maintenance for tournaments. And then I have another general reservation rate down here that closes it for those 2 months. This is just a compromise based on the discussions we had last year. I don't know if we want to keep it closed in April and May for Little League, so they have exclusive ride, or do we want to open it up for tournaments? And that's one of the main things I had here. And the peak rate would be $500 for a full day per field. So 7 fields is $3,500, which is just $100 more than St. George charges for a regular field.
I think we ought to do what you feel comfortable doing. If you feel like the fields are being abused, I think we need to do exactly what you've got right there.
Well, Yeah, right now it stands as where they can't have tournaments in April and May.
And I-
Nobody's allowed but
I
Little
think
League.
that's what we ought to do.
Okay,
I disagree.
okay.
I-
That's
I'm
why we're
just
talking
saying,
about.
And I just think we owe it to I've talked to a couple businesses that, I mean, we promote wanting business here in the community, and then your baseball tournaments. And again, I appreciate for the Little League and the use of Little League, but these businesses, these local businesses depend on those visitors. We've gone out and built these nightly rentals. Um, I'm not opposed to because I'm not opposed to the additional fee to an extent. Again, I mean, we get sales tax revenue and so all of that. I think there's other sources of revenue that come back to the city that are a direct benefit from the use of these fields. So I am cautious to put the fee so high that, but I do think that we need to acknowledge that during those times of year that these fields are a direct result. So maybe it's a combination of allotting additional funds to the maintenance, or maybe not, maybe it's just in that. But are you at $200 on those fields? I thought you raised the price on those.
No, they're at 200 right now, but
Are
that
they?
doesn't include everything. It doesn't include like a mound and things like that. So when you add those extra things in, it raises it up.
What you're seeing is, and this is my concern, is you're seeing a lot of these tournaments getting shifted to Cedar City and Mesquite. And so I think as a council, we've got to make that decision as to, and you can see why. Well, Hurricane, we've actually played a bunch in Hurricane as well. So they're 150. And I think as a council, we just need to look at,
When you compare Hurricane and you compare Santa Clara, there's a big difference. The Hurricane chalks the fields and then they go, and then
Yeah.
they just leave it. And, they don't clean bathrooms. They don't pick up trash. What we do for this fee is we have somebody there. We take care of the fields. We clean the trash. We clean the bathrooms. We're on all 7 fields. We do that for that fee. They don't.
I totally agree. No, it's night and day difference
Yeah.
playing here. My point is, as a parent in baseball, I have no problem paying a little more. I would much rather sit at our fields. They're better fields. They're better backdrops. It's just a better experience in general.
The reason for the extra fee is because the crews are working 6 days a week. I mean, the fields require a lot more maintenance because they're getting a lot more use. So let's say you have a Friday, Saturday tournament, you got to work Sunday to get ready for Monday, So we're really working 7 days a week. Plus during tournaments, we start at 6 a.m. and we stop at 11, during those days and the day before, for prep, and then the cleanup the following day. So that's why the extra money's in there, because it's a lot more work to run 6 days, because I can only work my full-time people 40 hours and I can only work part-time people 29 hours. I run out of hours. So what happens is I end up pulling my entire parks crew who do the mowing and the burials and all that stuff to work on the ball fields. And then then the maintenance of the city kind of goes down because we can't cover everything.
So is there I mean, because I've thought about this, I've watched your guys out there going 100, field to field. And so is there a solution to that would help? Maybe an independent contract, a private that could help kind of fill in those gaps, or are your guys fine doing it? Is it, I don't know, is there a better way to do it? Yeah, I guess is the question.
The cleaning up of the bathrooms and that sort of thing, or
Just the maintenance of when the tournaments end up on a Friday and linger even into a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and you run out of those hours and you're trying to maintain parks, would it help on some of those tournament weekends to maybe privately contract with somebody to clean the bathrooms and maintain the trash and grade the,
I wouldn't feel comfortable with them grading and maintaining the fields, but cleanup would be great. we actually lowered our deposit because we were going to have people there to clean. You know, we have another option down below that where we really raise the deposit up and then we don't really do anything besides bathrooms. And so that's why I brought it. There was some discussion last year, you know, between the businesses and the Little League and, you know, how do you make it all work? So Washington does something similar. Washington City, they have a peak season, but theirs is all year except for December, January, and July and August. It's peak season, and they're $350 a field.
For April, May or March and April, I think you could justify. That's literally your Little League season. So that's when you're going to be at full capacity on those. So I don't think, not speaking of the businesses that run these, but I can't imagine that's going to hurt them terribly. I know they like to play here. So
Yeah, I think they'll pay the extra money just to have the experience of playing over here.
yeah.
The reason we went to April and May was simply because Little League said we don't have anywhere to practice. You know, you're running tournaments all the time, and they're when and where do we practice? You know, so that's why we went to that originally.
Okay, what about you said you want to talk about the new park too?
Yeah, it's in here. So on this city facility fee schedule, I think the one in your packet isn't up to date as the one I have, but everything in red is deleted, everything in blue is added. So let's see. Okay, so I've got Swiss Pioneer Memorial Park at $300 a day. We kind of have it set up like Heritage Square if somebody wanted to come in and rent it for a wedding. And then we have the hourly rate of $25 per hour. So it's set up like that. But you can also rent the pavilion, just the pavilion, like we do at all the other parks if you want to have a picnic or a family reunion. But if you want to rent the entire park for a wedding or a family reunion, then we have that option too. Or just like Heritage Square. So I have those numbers the same as Heritage Square for the Swiss Pioneer Memorial Park.
Is it missing a line for the pavilion?
No, it's included. We put all the pavilions together in one group.
They're up under.
So we got large pavilions and small pavilions. It's up.
Is it the large one?
Yeah, it's the large rate. So it's $35 for non-resident, $20 for resident.
Is that for an hour or the day or what?
Normally we've been trying to do it by half days, but currently we're doing $20 all day.
So $20 a day rental on pavilion.
Yeah. And what that does is cover what we try to do is like this weekend, we've got a family reunion on the 4th. We'll send somebody out to clean up, check it before the reunion gets there, just to make sure somebody before them hasn't left it a mess and make sure it's clean. So that just covers the guy going out to do that.
Do we post notices on the pavilions or at the facility
We do.
park or whatever, so
We do,
somebody knows
yeah.
it's going to be used? Okay.
Yeah, we do. And the other change was, and the mayor asked for this a while back, and I'm trying to find it in here, is pickleball courts.
It's there.
It's on the
Under small pavilion,
Oh, is it?
Gila
Okay.
pickleball.
Anyway, we
'cause I had questions.
had been asked to come up with a rate. I don't see it. I'm blind, but
$15 resident, $25 non-resident.
right. And we were going to try that on Tuesdays and Thursdays, just lock out a block, you know, where people could rent a court if they wanted to play. The complaint was that nobody can get a court because it's always being overrun by people and they don't get off the court when they're supposed to. So this will give them a chance to reserve it. And I think we were thinking Mondays and Wednesdays because Tuesdays and Thursdays are the busiest days, and just try that.
And it's just during the daylight hours, right?
Yeah, I think our rentals were going to be we were going to try small, like between the hours like 8 and 12, you know, Mondays and Wednesdays, or maybe we could do it in the evenings too. It doesn't matter. We're open till 10. So we added that in there too. That's something new.
Cool. Questions for Brad, guys? This will be back on our next agenda.
Yes.
Will be on the 22nd.
Can be.
I believe change to the fee schedule, will need a public hearing. So,
So it'll be on 22nd.
yep, so 22nd, then, what's that? I believe so, on a change to the fee schedule, we need to do a public hearing, and then, so it'll be the 22nd, then we'll bring it back in August, first regular meeting in August unless you, I don't know, I wanted, not always the hugest fan of doing public hearings and approvals always the same. Sometimes we do. This one's a little bit smaller. We could do the approval that night.
On this one, I don't have a problem doing it the same night. This isn't, I can't imagine this be a hugely controversial public hearing.
I can't see any controversy at all.
Unless you guys don't want to tip your hand to the public hearing, you know, wait, give it a couple of weeks, hope they don't show up. Okay,
All right, thank you.
thanks, Brad. Is dinner here yet?
It will be on its way.
Oh boy, shooting range discussion.
Not much of a discussion. But
Jack's loaded for bear. What do you mean?
Jack's got the maps, and this is a layout that was prepared by Jones and DeMille. And I guess they have gone through the process of basically giving you an idea of dimension and size, and they've talked about, well, as you read the paper handout here, one of the big issues is the ACEC and the road alignment. And I think we can work through that with Keith. But one of the concerns we've had is who's going to build the road. And I visited with Ron Whitehead again today, and he remembers in the discussion that the commissioners had determined that they would help to facilitate this if Santa Clara would take full ownership. And I said, great. Then by inference, I assume you will take care of the road.
What'd you say?
He just smiled. But I think they will.
Yeah, so the engineering company here said that there's still a few things that need to be done to be able to complete the project. They do have the road mapped, and they have topo, and they have the critical areas marked on the map of, on the road, leaving the sycamores going up and around and over to the range. And then also they've got the range, and I guess there's some area in the pistol area that the BLM was concerned about the critical areas there, and that might have to be changed just a little bit. I guess the question is whether or not the city council really wants to pursue this. You know, it's a right that the people have had for a number of years in Santa Clara to be able to go out and shoot. And with the BLM going up there and building all the trails and the biking, and also we've got a new park that's going to be going in, it's getting really dangerous with the people shooting there. And I don't know that it's fair to say that we're not going to have a shooting range and say no shooting there, so that we lose that right when it was a right for the citizens here in Santa Clara to be able to do that. But we do have a real safety problem out there. And so we need to make a decision whether or not we want to pursue the shooting range, or do we want to stop the shooting and push the shooting out further and start enforcing it. And, you know, it's going to take some money. There still needs to be the environmental done. We don't know. I asked Rick today whether where the BLM has been so involved in building all the stuff out here in the South Hills and pushing the shooting out further, that maybe they should help some way in getting the environmental study completed so that we could move forward. we're still looking at probably a year and a half, even if we got started today to accomplish this.
Yeah, you wouldn't even be able to do your plant surveys until next April and May. So you
Yeah.
couldn't even start those things until then.
And they walked the areas and they cleared the area the first time we went out there, and they thought it was, a good area to do it. But you do have some critical areas on the road going out that need to be worked through.
Well, they're ACECs, they're study areas, so as long as we can supply the information. But my question, to what extent do we want a shooting range? Do we want to be able to just go out to a particular area and shoot? Or do you actually want to have venues where we go to the expense of a baffle system for rifle shooting? Do we want to go to a target range for pistols? And what do you perceive you wanting to have in the shooting sport? I mean, to me, we've done basically at your own risk, go out and shoot, and that would still be an issue in the future. But what do we want to have done? I know that the county received a $500,000 grant from the NRA to go ahead and get started. And then the clubs actually came up with a bunch of money, and they do the maintenance and so forth out of the county. But it's a big time commitment and a lot of money.
What's the downside, I guess? Obviously, the financial commitment,
Liability.
liability. Is there more liability than what we have right now, just freely shooting out there?
No. In fact, you probably have about, the only way I think you're going to eliminate the liability is if you put a no shooting zone. Just
Yeah.
sign it and enforce it, then you're taking away the liability. But if you're going to have a shooting sports park, you're going to have some liability insurance, and you're going to have to provide safety features. But even that, I mean, the baffle system over at the county, we had 2 bullets ended up in garages up on Clara Canyon that they think came from the shooting sports park.
We had a door hit over here by you, Mayor.
Mhm.
There was a door that was struck by a stray bullet.
On Vineyard,
Yeah.
garage casing.
So,
I mean, those are issues that you've already got, but if you're not going to put up some restrictions, you're not going to be able to limit liability.
Jack, I'm interested. I mean, you know this area. I'm looking at the map here. The black dotted line, is that the existing road now going up
Yes.
into there?
The
What are
Sticky Springs Road.
the black, kind of the points of reference, the black dots on this map that we're looking at? And I don't,
They just designate the different shooting areas. The very bottom one, I think, was going to be a shotgun shooting area down in the Long Point.
okay.
And then you would have the next one up would have been clay pigeon area where they what do they call it? They come from each
Skeet.
direction and
Skeet. and
they're set up
Sporting clays.
sporting clay. And then the next one up would be the rifle shooting. And then the next 2 were, I think, pistol.
Okay.
And, I've asked Jones and DeMille to tell me what it would cost to complete their work that they were going to complete with the county. And he said he'd get that to me. I haven't seen it yet. I asked him to give me kind of a scope of work of what the county asked them to do. And this is what I got that you guys can see here. And he kind of gave me a reference of what had been completed and what hadn't. I know that the county did start an application for, they call it the RPP. Is that what it is, Rick?
Mhm.
And, but they only filled out like one line on it. Not much had been, yeah. So it's just a question of whether we want to put any money towards it. Do we want to do this? I know Denny's been assigned to it. I think that we could just put a porta potty out there and a dumpster once we got the road and let people just go out there and have a designated area that they could shoot. And then eventually maybe turn it over to a club and get some funding to make it a nice shooting range down the road, and maybe that's what we do, There's clubs, I think, that would do it. Craig Mangus and some of these other guys that Denny knows, I know would love to have a shooting range out here, but it does take work and time.
And that was my thought is can we get at a reasonably low cost? Could we get something started without spending millions of dollars into this?
Brad, how long is the RPNP to get your improvements done on the park? 10 years?
5 years.
5 years. So basically, if we got all of this plan, got the RPNP approved, you'd have 5 years to have your improvements in, and then the property would switch over to the city.
But you have to have a plan.
Yeah, in place there.
What you're gonna do on that property.
We wouldn't have to do everything that was on here. We could scale the plan back.
And you could work your way in, set up your zones and all that. But I would have to believe the funding's out there. I think you could approach the NRA again. I think you could approach the county. I think all of that's there. Something needs to happen. Either we need to put a stop to it, which may be difficult, but giving them a designated area seems to make sense.
We could phase the no shooting part too. I mean, Jack and I talked a little bit about this today. If we went with this plan, then when this was completed, we would enforce no shooting everywhere but here. So that entire 1,500 acres, this would be the only place you could shoot. If we wanted to do and start enforcing a no shooting over the north half of the BLM property now, to where maybe the new 50-acre adventure park, water tank area, this side of the ridge, the north side of the ridge, no shooting there, and push them back into the south part, the Cove Wash, and down in this corner if they wanted to shoot on the interim. We could do that anytime and just direct public safety to do whatever ordinance we needed and direct public safety to start enforcing it. And that would help with some of the trail safety issues that we've got now. It would should move it away into some of those lesser used areas. Proceed with this, because Jack's right, it's probably going to take a couple of years. It took us 3 years to get before we could start improvements on the adventure park. I would hope in 2 years we could start the improvements on this. So we could enforce a no shooting on the north half now and get going on this. They would be shooting down there, and then we would enforce the no shooting down with the exception of the range, and then take over the range. But we need to budget some funds. You're going to get a proposal to finish out this work, the RPNP and the environmental work. We'll have to put money that way. And then we'll have to prepare to put some seed money to go after the grants and then get that committee put together. There's been 3 or 4 that have contacted me about wanting to help get something going. Now, whether that's running a range like they've got at Laburican or going the shooting park, that's left to be decided. But
Well, and there are maintenance issues. I know we did a lot of pushing dirt, moving mounds, setting up that came straight out of the county budget, even after we got venues established, what they needed. You go down to the shotgun venue and they have to pick up the lead pellets. Well, they shoot all they want. Then they have to come in and they have groups come out and pick up the BBs. So there's a lot of maintenance. They're lead. If they go to steel, they don't have to do that. But the But that's my question. I think we need to do the limiting on the north already. But then what do we want to perceive as far as the plan? Wait until they get us everything here, and then I can meet with you guys and we determine what we need to do and pursue it with the BLM for the permit.
Yeah, I'd like to have another meeting, a serious meeting with the BLM and make sure that they think this is going to work before we invest any money. Because if it's not, there's no reason to, spend any more money with these guys. I think we ought to get a commitment out of them. I know there's sensitive areas, but they know if we can work around those or not.
What he's going to tell you though is that until they get the green light from U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, he can't commit to anything. So you
Yeah.
have to do the studies.
I'm wondering if we can talk to Larry that's on the habitat from the Fish and Wildlife.
Larry Christ, he's retired.
Larry Chris retired too. And Jim Chris retired. So who we got?
All the players are gone, bro. We got a bunch of newbies, and they are suckers, bro.
Well,
We
maybe-
just gotta. We can meet with Keith. Keith's happy to meet. We've asked that question at least twice in the past. And get your studies done. I'll get them to the Fish and Wildlife Service. I'll do everything I can to support it, but he can't commit to it till he gets their blessing.
Well, maybe we meet with the Fish and Wildlife and have a meeting with them.
Well, now out where we're talking about, the only endangered animal species would be the tortoise.
I believe so.
The ACECs are actually the straggler.
And well, and what
And they're,
Stragulus and the milk bitches and the buffer area, we may have to pull this back because the buffer area on one of the plant species that's west of the Stookie Springs Road extends over into one of these pistol zones. So they had recommended that we slide everything back a little bit just to provide, so that we're out of that buffer because they thought the Fish and Wildlife Service would have issues with that. But we can set up another meeting and go to them and, hey, but I would get your numbers together.
Okay.
I think we need to get the cost together because the cost will help us show him that, hey, we're getting ready to spend $100,000 right here. We need some support from you guys that you're going to help push this through. And we can talk to him about the enforcement on the north at the same time because their people will help with that.
well, and they need to be, they're just as liable as,
Sure. I think they're more,
I think they are too, because they're actually the owner.
and they're promoting the trails.
Right. That was going to be my question. Will the BLM allow us to designate part of this area now so that we can move them off the north end without even having this in place?
We can't designate it. They can't designate it. We just won't enforce no shooting down there.
The road's so rough that 99% of the people would never take a vehicle down there right now.
Oh,
Go.
that's why they're all.
It's pretty tough in a 4-wheel drive truck. And
How
it
long
takes,
would how long would it take to get the road in good condition just to do minimal at the shooting range? In other words, you're
I'm
going to
just
have
thinking-
some expensive.
Yeah.
it's going to be some pretty severe work. You're going to have a cat and they're going to have to rip a lot of rock.
Oh, big time.
You got a lot of road base, and I think we could get some numbers on, amount of road base we're going to need. And yeah,
And I would say we'd try and push them separately, push the road through separate from the shooting range, don't tie them together. Because I think the road will go faster and we can get started on it a little earlier. Because it's nasty.
it'd be easier to push the shooters out. They can just shoot anywhere out there.
Then we can enforce them to that corner. And we can't designate it, but we won't enforce no shooting there. And they'll figure that out pretty fast.
If you want to have a scary experience, go out there on a busy weekend.
Yeah.
Oh, no,
I mean,
not anymore.
they're shooting.
But if they can't drive further away, then it's.
That's
then
why
it-
they stop.
Then that's why they stop. So we
Yeah.
need to fix the road.
I've got
first.
2 articles of people in Utah that have shot guns. They didn't realize there was a road or there were people on the other side and they shot and they killed somebody. And it's completely ruined their lives. And this is going to happen right out here. And people don't even know that there's people riding bikes on the other side of the hill, that they're parked up there. People just don't know.
So if the range, if this is not a go, but we still wanted to, I mean, because I'm with you, something needs to happen sooner than 2 years.
Even if they don't get the RP&P, we enforce the no shooting in the city limits, except for that corner.
But could we go in and could
And
we
rebuild
could we
the road.
improve the road enough to
It's a county road.
Except
I don't know that it's a county road. You could work on the area that's already been disturbed, but you couldn't widen it or make it any bigger.
Well, unless you went and got the right of way for it.
Yeah, but then you've got to do all the environmental stuff.
Yeah, but I don't worry about that on the road.
Okay.
It may, we might be a year away because we can't start the studies, but the road, I don't think the road,
road's an existing road. We
Yeah.
can go in and
we're just,
I mean, if there was a D9 cat out there and just a resident, the key got left in it and a local resident just jumped in it and started to, I mean, just hypothetically, we still on the, there. Just saying.
is if you move outside of the existing road footprint by 12 inches.
and we need to move the road around. We can't build the road where it is right now.
Where it is right now. I guess that's the thing. So as a council, I mean, something needs to happen.
I think
There's no doubt.
Let's get the costs. Let's take the time and figure out what's it going to cost us to improve the road. Then we can start negotiating with the county and start working on the right of way. How much do we willing to spend to get the permitting, the RP&P done for the range? Let's pull all that financial stuff together and let's go see where we got some help with the money.
Okay.
And if you've got any money in the budget, then let's do it. But I think we could probably start looking at a enforced shooting area out there right now, independent of all that. Whether that takes an ordinance, it'll have to have a map. We'll have to figure out how we're going to designate it on the ground and how we're going to enforce it. And we can start those meetings with the BLM.
Is there an area you can move it to?
You can't shoot here. So you have to go down there to shoot.
And the
An
road's good enough
informal
to get to those
designation.
spots.
We actually improved the road out to Cove Wash. It's tore up again, but the county came out and we made some improvements there. There needs to be some culverts put in and some things done to try to keep it so it doesn't get washed out. And it's so clay once you drop off the other side that it turns into a mess. And then it's hard for people to get out far enough to actually shoot. So they take the easiest spot right up here on these little hills to shoot. Where if we had at least enough of a road to get them out to Cove Wash, they could at least go down to Cove Wash and shoot. But there's still a lot of people, if you go up from Cove Wash, there's still bikers up there.
Yeah.
So they really need to get out further than that.
I was thinking the other day, a community project of cleanup out there and just
The
maybe we
trail,
provide some dumpsters out there and just do a service project where we can get some trucks up there to load trash and
the mountain bikers do it.
Yeah, they
They
have
have a
one.
pretty organized group and they go out and do cleanups a couple times a year.
yeah.
We could do one on a city sponsored one anytime we wanted.
It'd be great. So
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jack. Thanks, Denny, spearheading that.
I'll
Keep,
get out.
keep up the good work, buddy. Okay, I'm down to staff reports and still haven't been fed.
it's on its way. I'm mapping it right here. We'll have something to go for sure.
Okay, chief?
Yes.
Yeah.
So our wildland crew got back last week from their deployment out to the Kaibab Forest. They were there for their full 16 days, which was they were real busy while they were out there. And then recently they were out on this volcano fire up in Snow Canyon off of SR 18 that started last Sunday evening. And they've been working that fire this whole week. They've been up there. So that's keeping them busy. We've got the 4th of July obviously coming up this weekend. So we're going to be doing some fireworks patrols, going out, sending an engine out in both cities to kind of keep tabs on things and be ready for action. Always is nervous when things are so dry and we haven't had any moisture. So we're just keeping an eye on that. We do have fire restrictions in certain areas. So we place that on the city website that people can look at the map and know where they can legally light off their fireworks without causing too much trouble that way. We last Saturday we had that benefit dinner for Clara at Chef Hogg's restaurant. That was very well attended, and we got a lot of good support from the council and the citizens and the staff members here. We appreciate everybody's response, helping us out there. So she's doing well. She's done with her surgery. Now she's just kind of waiting for her incisions and things to heal up before she can start her next phase of her treatment. But she's in good spirits and she looked well. She attended that dinner and we were all happy to see her and support her that way. I think we raised somewhere around $6,000 at that dinner. So that's going to be helpful for her and her family and her medical expenses that she's got coming up from that. So other than that, we're just busy. Every day's, a new adventure for us. And like I said, we're looking forward to this weekend to see how that all plays out for us. So any questions for me or what we got going?
Tell everybody to go to St. George. They're supposedly going to have these massive fireworks.
Yeah, the biggest ever.
Ever in
So
140-year history or something.
yeah, just watch them from St. George. Don't do your own fireworks.
Yeah.
That's what I recommend. Absolutely.
Chief, what's the fire risk of shooting?
Pardon?
The risk of fire by the wildland shooting? How risky is it?
It's risky. Well, you saw the fires, some of the fires that they had up north in Saratoga Springs and those areas. And in recent past history, they have had fires start from shooting. So that is a concern for us as well. People will take out and start these incendiary targets too. And that's caused several fires that we've responded on as well. So yes, it is a concern and a danger, something to consider. Absolutely. So keep that in mind, council, when you're.
So I'm just thinking as part of the enforcement, we can use that as one of the whereases.
Yeah.
In that ordinance. Thanks, Chief. Bradley?
The trail behind Harmon's, the lava flow trail, is almost complete. They're working on the Rachel Drive. They got the asphalt from Harmon's to across the wash there, all the way over to the school completed. They're working on the sidewalk today. They'll do the trail connections, and it's just about 90% done. We've got to figure out how to cross the wash where Red Mountain Road goes through there. We're working on that, but a lot of people are already using it. I mean, they were going by the equipment and their bicycles and strollers and everything. As the track hose were trying to work, we couldn't really keep them out, but it's really nice, and it's going to be really a highly used trail. We also sign the trails now. All the trails have sign markers like St. George has on their trails that shows like 2 miles to Canyon View, 3 miles to Goobler, Chopping, that kind of stuff that are along the trails, starting at Canyon View and going all the way to Ivan's Border. We were thinking about doing something on the trail along Highway 18, but we were thinking about doing maybe some kind of historic tour or something like that, the fort and Jacob Hamlin and that kind of stuff, and kind of sign it and make it kind of a historic type walk, or maybe something a little bit more downtown Santa Clara type hike, instead of just being regular trail markers, to do something like that. Pioneer Memorial Park, the playground's here. It's being put in. They've got the uprights in, the covers here, and they should be done in the next 2 days or so. With the playground, landscape's suffering a little bit with the heat, and they've had some with the high winds and water issues and stuff. We're losing some of the plants, but it's all under warranty. Still having problems with COVID as far as suppliers go. We're not able to get like metal tables and garbage cans and stuff like that. I've had them on order for 6 weeks, and the factory's closed. They're supposed to give me a report this week, but we're really, really close on finishing it up, just to finishing touches and stuff like that. We had originally talked about maybe doing some kind of celebration on July 22nd, the week of Pioneer Week. You know, we have city council, I think, that day, and maybe just kind of do a ribbon cutting or something like that. I've got some stone benches coming out of Kanab. We're going to pick up next week to set out there, some nice sandstone benches. So it'll be pretty nice. Have to see it at night with all the lights on. It's really beautiful. I think that's all I really have. Anything? I don't think I have anything else. Any questions?
Bradley, Josh, I had a question and he handed me a sandwich. The day we were up there and walked the trail that goes up to Truman Drive, that's in now?
Yeah. We it's not complete, but we've got everything through. It's road base. It goes up over the pipe, comes around. We've got it routed really nice. We're just got to work on the ends a little bit, and I'd like to put like one of those stone benches I bought up on top, kind of on a concrete pad, so you can kind of look out over the valley, you know, at the top of the trail. But it's in, and I mean, you can walk from the top to the bottom now. It's just.
Are you going to sign it as well?
Yeah, we'll sign it.
Chief, one thing for your wildland crew, I know that they're busy right now, but when they get a free time to need some chainsaw practice, there's a bunch of tamarisk adjacent to that new walking trail that really could go away. And I hate to tell you to burn it, so you may have to cut it, but cut and treat it. Brad's got the chemical. It could go away and really enhance that experience. And then did you find anything on that pipe when Ryan dug into that? Did it go into the ground? Jack, would you have one of your guys go up there and find the end of that pipe and make sure it's in the storm drain? The blue one? Any other questions for Brad? Thank you, Brad. Christelle, IT, what's new in IT?
IT.
I still owe you a mayor's newsletter.
I know. I was thinking about that. But yeah, everything's good.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah.
How's our subscriptions going for the digital newsletter?
We have 200 so far. I just really doing a message for that, for the water quality report. But yeah, I mean, we've had a lot more, like we had like none before. So, I mean, hopefully we'll collect them all eventually, but.
So when a subscription is emailed to them?
Yeah. So they can
Directly.
get everything emailed to them instead.
They can
of
get it on
in the
social
mail.
media and on the website now, but the subscription sends it to them.
Yeah.
You might not see a whole ton of subscriptions where people are able to pull it right off the website. Honestly.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Jack?
Okay, all the meters are pretty much installed, power and water, except for the south side of the river. And the only reason they're not is we're waiting for the rest of the power meters to show up. And then we'll have the whole system completed. The girls are operating it, and it's working great. I think one thing we do need to discuss is we do have a $50 disconnect. And now with the new system, Sherry can just turn it on and off from the office. Was wondering if we ought to reduce that down to $25, or do you want to keep it at 50? It's something that we probably ought to discuss a little bit.
I don't know. I'm not opposed to reducing the disconnect, but keep the connect up
Okay.
so
All
that
right.
when they try and get it turned back on, they pay the penalty instead of paying half when they disconnect and half when they reconnect. Make the disconnect cheap and double the penalty on the reconnect or something like that.
Okay. I can bring that back to council then. Also, UAMPS is, I got to remind everybody, 17th, 18th, and 19th of August. With things getting worse, I don't know if they'll still have it up there at Zermont, at Midway. I think they're still kind of trying to decide. So keep that on your. Also, July 20th, they might change the date, but they're going to have a town meeting to discuss the carbon-free project and where we're at with the DOE and how much money we've got. And the DOE does not want to do the jump. They've backed out of that, but they've gave us the money that would have took care of the jump. And UAMP staff has presented to us that they want to take that jump or that money that was designated for jump to pay for that module. They want to take that money and give it to the people that participated in the jump project, UAMP's members, so that it would reduce the power cost lower than the $55 for that jump. They're also looking at where the DOE is not going to take it for those 15 years, that they're looking for possibly being able to lay that off and sell it to somebody else if the cities don't need it. And that's something we'll be talking about. I know a lot of you got letters from a gentleman up north about the nuclear project, and UAMPS has met with him and tried to educate him, and they just feel like he's not listening, and he's got his own agenda, and I think that's one reason they're going to have this town meeting too, is to discuss and let you guys know. If it gets where it's too expensive, we have places that off ramps where we can get out of the project all the way along. And the way they've got this set up is they're using the DOE money. So the cities are only paying 25% of the actual cost as this is moving forward. Eventually we'll be all in, but the way they're setting it up, there's plenty of off ramps if things get out of control. That's why we're taking it slow. So I just want you to feel confident about the project. I know a lot of you have been there, seen it, been involved in this for a long time. So there'll be more information coming, and I'll let you know when that day is that they're going to have that town meeting. It'll be very a good meeting for you guys to be involved in, because you'll get a lot of information. Just regular maintenance. We're getting a lot of calls on new construction bids, stuff that's happening up by Harmon's, and new developments that we're working on, power prices and things that are happening. So we're pretty busy. And then with all the big projects that we just completed, Dustin's crews are busy just trying to get caught up, back up with all the maintenance. The guys did go up to Ivan's, and they're building a new yard up there and putting in a new building. And they took the crew up there and laid 150 ton of asphalt for them. And it turned out beautiful. They were really happy with it. So that's good.
They might get a reputation for doing that and get asked to go all over the
Yeah,
valley.
yeah, they're pretty good. And Dustin was really impressed because he was gone and the other guys went up and actually done it. And then Ivan's crews helped also too. So we're working really good with the cities, and that's awesome. You're going to notice that we'll be doing some work out here. We've got some problems with the sewer leaving the building. It kind of cuts on an angle over to where that fire hydrant is, I believe, and then it cuts out, and we've got some low spots, and we keep having problems with it plugging up. And so we've found those low spots, and you'll see some stuff going on out there, but that'll happen next week. But other than that, just normal work trying to get caught up.
Any questions, council?
I got an empty envelope from UAMPS a couple days ago.
You did?
I did. So did anyone else get a letter from UAMPS?
Like that. The white, it had the conference conference notice in it.
Okay, I was wondering, I figured it was something with a conference or maybe this town meeting.
Yours didn't have anything in it.
Yeah, just empty. It was addressed to me and everything.
Okay.
Wanted to make sure I wasn't missing something super important.
Those are, I think everybody here's been to a UANS conference. Wendell, you haven't, and I don't believe you have.
Had one
They're
this
very
year.
educational and they're very well attended from all the members that belong to UAMPS and throughout the city. And they have some good entertainment usually and things that happen now. This year, I don't know what for sure. I think it's going to be a little bit limited, but it is a beautiful place to go. So I'll keep you posted because we got to get our rooms and get going on that if you're going to attend.
Corey?
So we did make 80 new home permits for fiscal year 2019, 2020. There at the last, we had about 12 of them. Last Friday, we had Arcadia came in with twin homes and single homes and stuff. Also, so that was good. We are hearing about, development up at Harmon's, like Jack mentioned, tag and go. Frank Lindquist reached out to us to get us an amended site plan. He wants to put a drive-through on that portion, the addition they did that was 8,500 square feet. He wants to put a drive up on that one. And I got to check his last site plan. He amended all those site plans to have driveways last time. And he's basically submitting another site plan revision. So he also wanted to get with Jack on impact fees. And so Jack's going to give him a call. Other than that, just have a, regular Heritage Point construction drawings are about done. The Edge of Grad Desert is getting their final construction drawings finalized, so they'll be pulling land disturbance permits and stuff. So we're still moving forward. The O'Reillys will be coming. I think I told you that last month. When Dollar Tree was going to back out, the developer got O'Reilly's and interested in that parcel. Then Dollar Tree came back in. So they are thinking about going to the west there on the next parcel of Pioneer and Rachel. So
Where's Dollar Tree at?
the Dollar Tree has submitted two things, the shell for the building and also the tenant improvement. So those are at WC3 being reviewed. And we sent them all the information over to Todd for a grading permit and for their site plan. They're working on their SWIP. So they're supposed to get with Jack and Fred any day now to do a pre-construction meeting and break ground.
Did they put the wall on the south line, buffering the residents?
Yeah, they'll put that, like what was discussed in city council, a berm and a wall there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it shows on their plans.
Yeah.
Questions for Corey, council? Thanks, Corey.
Welcome.
Rob?
All right. Just a couple things. If you guys take a notice when you leave here, if you haven't walked through the front office administration in there, take a peek through the improvements that we worked on, pretty much complete. There's a few things they had to come back and maybe just touch up and fix, but they're pretty much done. I think it looks really, really well. They did a good job. Great when those improvements are done. But I know staff, we had a little trouble today with the fumes from the stain. Caused some we didn't feel real well this morning. Those that were right there in front of it. So And we ended up closing the office down for the morning. Ditzy and Sherry came back this afternoon about 1 o'clock and opened back up. We got fans and let it run and kind of helped ventilate it out. But in the morning, you could ask Chris, they were all lightheaded and nauseous. And so we closed for the morning and they came back. So we have, as will come on our agenda next week, we're changing accounting software, moving to a new accounting software called Polaris. So it'll be a change for staff, but it's a new change. I think it'll be better. They're the largest, have the most municipalities in the state of Utah apparently are on Polaris. Sherry and Debbie, who probably work almost the most in the accounting software. As treasurers, they've done a lot of research, talked with people. Debbie used Polaris at Ivans, so she's been kind of a fan of push of this. And but Sherry's done stuff, and they've all feel real comfortable with it. Talking with our treasurers and the ease of it. We've had a demo. We actually did a demo about 10 years ago with Wally Ritchie when he was here, the city manager. We did a demo with him, but so we're excited about that. That will go live on the 17th. So we have our auditors coming the end of August 26th to the 28th. We'll have our auditors here. So they'll be doing our financial audit. Other than that, we start a new fiscal year today. So I know department heads are excited and happy about that they are no longer under budget restrictions. And so they can actually spend some money and do a few things. So it's a good day for that. Other thing, just we had a Swiss Days meeting yesterday with myself and Ditzy and our two coordinators, Brooke Anson, Laney Fry, and Councilman Drake came in at the end after he had a meeting with Jack. As we've talked, Swiss Days is still on. For now, we've made changes to it. I think we've kind of talked about moving it to a 2-day event, Friday, Saturday. Still trying to hit the key events that we have of Swiss Days, the big ones that people love. So we're still trying to do that. We've kind of come to a conclusion that August 1st is our deadline to determine if we're going to continue forward with Swiss Days or not, depending on how things are going with that. Enough time to allow everything that we need in planning, make sure that we can have all the entertainment and things that we have planned to happen. So we'll know August 1st, depending on how our trajectory of response, things happening with COVID-19. So, but as right now, we're planning that it'll happen. I said Friday, Saturday. We have to do up a plan with the health department of how we are going to handle all different things of signage, attendance, anything we're doing, we have to have a big written narrative on it. So we'll be working on that. If we can't social distance, some of the things we'll probably have to do is with the big tent that we have with the entertainment, we won't be able to social distance. So like underneath there, it will have to be a required masks. If we're still under the current conditions we're in, it would be like a required mask to sit underneath the tent. Encourage masks, all else, and we hope people will comply. So, but we'll bring that back and we'll keep you up to date on where we're at with that. So the other thing I discussed that a little bit with the mayor today. I also talked with him about the banquet room, as we're getting filling more and more calls of people wanting to rent the banquet room. So we have a few for in August, but we're also getting sensitive to those people who want to host those events. Some of them are weddings. And if we tell them they can't, of having time to get to another venue. Matt is currently working on addendum to the rental contract that will address the COVID-19 and their responsibilities with that and what they need to do. So hopefully we will have something done for next week. And that's also if council feels like we want to open it up rentals in August, or we want to push that back further and keep that off limits at this time for rentals. So,
Council, what's your view there? Well, maybe let me give you this report first, and then I'll come back and ask you that question. This is the report I got yesterday from Dr. Blodgett and from Dr. Ferguson. As of yesterday, over the last 7 days, there were 9 patients in the ICU. 14 had been transferred up to the floors. Our hospitalization rate had decreased slightly. It had been as high as 8% of the cases ended up being hospitalized. It had dropped to 6% with less than 1% fatalities. They attributed to the recent spike and then the decline to the number of number of events that happened from Memorial Day through the first part of the month, including the protests, and then the lack of events that have happened the last half of the month. It's been a fairly quiet month event-wise. They seem to feel that the spikes are following the public gathering events. When people get together in mass crowds, we see more cases. The concerning point to me was that the ICU has been hovering around 100% full. They're very near capacity. They have to sometimes move somebody out onto the floor to admit a new person into the ICU, but it's not all COVID. It's only about 1/3 COVID. So we've got a lot of other heart attacks, other things that are happening that are causing those ICU stays. The average stay in the hospital is 10 days for the COVID. If they make it to the ICU, they're usually there 13 days on average, but that used to be 30 days. And so the treatments, they've got a drug that they're giving them right now that is showing some real promise as far as speeding up the recovery. And so they're dropped their stays down to 13 days, which is, that's good news. They're doing a lot of contract tracing, but they're meeting a lot of resistance and non-response, particularly from young people. Young people don't like being called. They don't like being checked up on. They don't like schooling on their friends. So they don't respond to the tracing when they get contacted.
Mayor, you talking about Washington County?
This is Washington County. Well, this is, the hospitalization is all Dixie Regional Medical Center specific. Some of the information we get is 5 county, but all the hospitalization is Washington County numbers. They still expect it's going to be 9 months till they get a vaccine. They talked about the lag time from the time you get contacted until you end up being hospitalized is 7 to 10 days. And so they encourage us again to just be vigilant, to protect ourselves, to protect our people. They opened the shuttles at Zion today. They sold 600 tickets. They were sold in 8 minutes yesterday. They opened at 7. They were sold out at 7:08. They've cut their capacities back. Usually they can take 80 people on a bus. They're limiting them to 33 now for social distancing. They're trying to get buses into Springdale to kind of help that. Colab Canyon's still closed. They're trying to get that open, but the Park Service says they need the rangers at the main canyon. So anyway, Ironman is still a go right now. They're still planning on holding the event this fall. There is some money available through the CARES Act that the city can help a business with COVID expenses to combat the spread and benefit if they do it this year. So I don't know how we get the word out to our businesses, but we may be able to help with that. We can work through the chamber, Don Willie at the Chamber of Commerce, to work on that as well. There were 59 inmates tested positive at the jail over the last 8 days. So they had a big spike in the jail. They're working with that. They're only about half capacity right now, so they can do a little bit of social distancing, but once it gets in there, it's hard. So now I'll give you that glorious flowery update. What do you think about opening the reception hall? If we put a plan in place that they have to adhere to the requirements, may require masks inside, social distancing, limited capacities, sanitize it when they finish. maybe increase the cost of, so that we can cover the I want to say sanitization. Is that, if that's a word or not?
Sanitizing.
That's it. So we'll make sure it's done for the next group. What do you guys think? You want to hold off for a little while? It's still closed?
Well, I can give a little bit of a reference. I went to a wedding reception last weekend over in St. George, and I was one of 3 people wearing a mask in the whole place. And everyone was bunched around tables, and it's a big, and it wasn't just family, it was a lot of different people. So I think even if you require them, I don't know. And a lot of people just had it hanging on their ear. So it's going to be hard to actually enforce it.
Are we required to force? We don't have to have
We
a
don't-
mask requirement, do we?
No, this is just whatever we want to put on it.
It's how responsible do we want to be
Yeah,
in this
how-
situation?
How progressive do you want to be to help them? We're not going to enforce it.
Because you're going to sanitize it. I mean, it's at the end of the day, it's,
I'm kind of thinking that we write up some guidelines and say, please, we encourage you to follow these guidelines. We're not going to come down here and arrest you if you don't.
Well, don't put that in.
But please follow the guidelines.
because the inmates are wearing masks and they have a full breakout. So I'm just saying, if we're sanitizing the building, I think that's,
And we may want to limit some, what's the capacity in there, Corey? Maybe you limit it to 50.
Yeah, that would be me at a time. I mean,
Mhm.
you can run them in and out, but no more than 50. And
150 at a time. I mean, you guys are okay with it? I'll have Brock put together some new guidelines and we'll open it back up.
I'd like to see, again, I'm all for the sanitation and that, but I think it'd be,
The trick is, it doesn't really pass on surfaces from what I've read. And so it's more just, it's the contact between people, and all the CDC stuff lately is just stay 6 feet away from everyone and wear a mask.
I think
You
we
just
still
can't do
want,
that in a wedding reception.
I think we want to sanitize just to protect the morale of the employees in the building.
Yeah.
and that's fine. That's not hard to do. So
And we'll have to look into that, of getting, maybe having to contract that out or something to do, because depending on how many we have, we were struggling at times just to get cleaning supplies, just to have the bit that we have. And so we'll be out in no time. So we'll have to contract that out with somebody to come in and do it after each event.
Your playground's still closed? Better reopen. We got anything else closed except the banquet room?
Heritage Square. Yeah, the Heritage Square, we don't take.
Is the splash pad working? Really?
Okay, so if we open reception, we're pretty much open. Everything's back, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is there any indication that we might move back to?
No, there's no, I don't think the governor's going to move us back to orange unless things get a whole lot worse than they are right now. They're kind of pushing the stay safe, what's it called? It's their latest tagline. Stay safe to stay open campaign. So take care of yourself is kind of the gist of it. They are planning on, the school board is planning on face-to-face classes with an optional online. They're recommending masks, not mandating masks. They'll mandate masks on teachers and staff per the governor or the State Board of Education, one of the two.
a lot of parents are going to be happy hearing that news. So
They'll be
There's a lot
happier.
of-
I hope
there's a
we're
lot.
still happier in October.
Yeah.
That's my next big worry, is about a month after school starts, what happens. But like that, when it comes, protect yourself, protect your families. What else?
The only thing I have to is for next week, just a heads up, wrap tax.
How
awards
many
will come.
applications did we get
2.
from
Ham Productions and Susie Nelson with the Historical Society.
Shakespeare in the Park
Yep.
and the
Yeah, the Historical Society on how the events that Susie does. She has a handful. Hers is about $3,500 in ham. I think is asking for 10, maybe a little bit more than that.
Brad might be bonus.
So and then we have the Tuacon that we're on the hook for 5,000.
So we got to give them even though they're not
Yeah, that was
showing.
my question.
Yeah, we do. I know. That's okay.
It'd only be if they called and got like their bond or whatever, they're suspended on payments. So,
Brad, are you ready for trees on Benelli? Just give me the order. I'll have them shipped down to you. Is it the crepe myrtle you have on down on the drive here, the flowering ones? Those look good. Can I make a request? Mayor, can we plant big trees on the lava berm there?
You
All
can
right,
get them
Brad.
to grow.
We'll talk, Brad. We got some ideas.
Yeah, on this side of lava, do whatever you man. Knock yourself out. Okay. Anybody got anything else to talk about? Questions? Chris, did you have anything? Okay.
I have a couple questions.
Bradley. Oh, hang on just a sec. Brad. I don't know. Probably. With some guidelines. I mean, just the standard stuff. I mean, you should be used to that now, though none of them are doing it, but they should be used to being told they should.
Yeah.
Best part. Played a bunch of teams from Nevada. First game was like, good job. Last game was like, good game.
They did that over at Washington
Yeah.
Soccer League too.
Okay, Jarrett.
Just for Brock, just for everyone's information, with the accounting software, that will trickle into a couple other things. So like our utility bills will change a little bit, which will be really nice.
yeah, so
It
Yeah,
doesn't affect just the accounting. It does filter in other departments as well.
yeah, it's a ease of a lot of things. One of the things that also push this is with our current accounting software, anytime like we wanted to make changes, we wanted to do some, it was always like, oh, well, you can do that, but it's going to cost you. It'll be this much more to do that. If you want to do that, it'll cost you some more money. And with this new one, Polaris, it's, you pay your fee and we can make changes. If they don't have stuff, they've been really good. I remember this one from the demo back 10 years ago. And it's like, okay, well, if you want that, we'll look into it. We'll see if we can develop that. With our current one, it's always, that'll cost money. Like one of the things we recently talked about adding to utility bills is graphs. So you could compare current year versus last year, like over a 12-month period. And it was, yeah, we can do that for you, but it's going to cost you some money. With the new one, they're like, oh yeah, we can put that together for you and we can do that. There's a few things that our current software has that the new one doesn't, that mainly more affects me budgeting wise. And they just said, oh yeah, we'll have that for you for your next year. We'll have it developed for you. So, and it's no additional cost. It's just part of software. So so some things that are really nice, but yeah, our utility bills are going to change a little bit. We'll probably a little more detail to them, be able to get some more information on them. We're going to go two-sided, so we can put some information on the back, additional information that we need to, that comes there, stuff that comes that you'll need every month maybe, and then stuff that's just pertinent that month or so. Yeah, that's true.
Okay. And then my other request was maybe if Swiss Days can't happen, that there's a plan C, that there's still events that weekend, but it's nothing traditional. So something like a drive-in movie at Googler Park. It's a big parking lot, put up a screen at the end and have a drive-in movie. We have rights to show movies. We have the screen, it's things like that. Maybe brainstorm a little bit of, if we can't do Swiss Days, what can we do to at least keep the tradition there? So, and even I guess St. George is doing their run this weekend, so we can probably learn from that. Maybe we can still do our 4K. And anyways, because I've thought about Swiss Days and man, I don't see how we can keep social distancing possible with the way it goes.
Especially if we get a spike after school starts. It's
Yeah.
going to be spiking right about the time Swiss Days happens.
But we still need to have something. I think we can do some things and be totally safe and still keep that tradition there.
Just have the parade and throw the.
Well, they're even doing the parade this weekend.
Yeah. I
So they
don't know
just
how
stretched
can
it
do
out so
that.
people can be farther apart from each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. We talked about that in our meeting. We talked about the parade and extending it further to the east. How far do you go? I know our discussion came that they'll all still be from here,
Yeah.
Yeah.
the gates. I mean, it's just where the people are going to go. Even if we said social distance spread out, we're going to go clear to lava flow. Like I see it all coming between Snow Canyon Parkway or the Santa Clara Parkway, and there we'll just.
Maybe you have to start in the heights and come down the hill and through town.
Yeah, make it really long.
You could go back to the old kind of reverse route, go old school, start at Santa Clara Elementary, go down Crestview, old school down all the way Canyon View to Dutchman's, and then kick back and go this way.
I didn't know that was old school.
Mm-hmm.
That was when I went
I
down
remember.
Crestview because Swiss Days was at Canyon View Park.
Mm.
So you could kind of go reverse that way, but so.
Well, we got a little while to kind of watch it and see what's happening. We may not have a choice in the end of September.
Yeah.
I don't want to spend a whole lot of money and then just get.
Yeah. But that's kind of where we talked about August 1st was the day we kind of need to decide so people know the plan. It's when people started, we were going to open up, I think, our for 5K registration and things. So people know if we're going to happen and getting entertainment, having Carrie Perry light up entertainment and all those things. So that was kind of our day of making sure that we can still make it happen effectively. So.
You still thinking the breakfast and with the 5K and that?
Well, that was one of the things that we talked about and so Friday night, we're moving away from the Thursday night opening ceremonies and community dinner and kick that to Friday, no community dinner. We would have food trucks here and do opening ceremonies, the Swiss Mister, and then we were going to do like movie in the park versus, usually Friday night was the entertainment, the concert or whatnot. We'd go away from that, do more of a family movie in the park. And then Saturday we would continue on with the traditional 5K parade and pancake breakfast. Of all those, the one that creates probably a lot of, besides the parade, is, 5K, we can stagger people out as they run to create some social distancing that way. Pancake breakfast, we will have to do tables all spread out, leave 10 chairs and try to keep, or so we talked about trying to really space them out. So there's social distancing as much as we can that way. And then parade, I think you put barriers along and where people can and can't be. So those are kind of the things we talked about. We talked about only going until about 2:00 on Saturday, cutting it down a little bit. So we talked about doing no merchandise vendors, reducing some of all that over there would kind of be. Then we would do the movie night over there, and that, but we wouldn't do the merchandise vendors over there. We wouldn't have them this year. So I don't know.
If we could encourage them to park, we're not going to probably run the shuttles.
Yeah, I know.
If we could encourage them to park down, maybe talk to Patrick Manning and get that dirt lot next to her gates that we used, stage on the bridge, where they could park there. Now they've got access through Roan that they never had before. This year you can get to Chapel Street, get the church maybe a little easier. If we could disperse the crowd by dispersing the parking, then you may get the crowd dispersed. And if you have less events happening here, there'll be less pressure to come here. Then maybe the parade could work.
Yeah.
Because there are some parade guidelines in the governor's stuff you have to comply with on parades.
It'd be great to see something in that. I think, I agree with Jared. What we can do, let's do. I mean, what we think we can do, try to make it work.
I think you'll see less. Well, I don't know what you're going to see. Every time I say you see less crowds, the crowd blows me away. So I'm not seeing that anymore.
A lot of people itching to.
They're sitting there
Yeah.
ready to do something.
Yeah, it's and that's why again, they're testing a lot. I think we're seeing and that's okay. But I think there's a big resistance to try to not go backwards because.
Sure. And yeah, and it goes clear to the top. Nobody wants to dial it back. Okay, anything else? Anybody? Jared, anything? Okay, we're done. We're adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Good work.
Thanks for dinner.
Hey, I'm glad we got it.
Thanks for the sandwich, Ben.